So, a very, very good evening to all of you and welcome to the TDS chapter. This is basically Deduction, Collection and Recovery of Tax. This is chapter 13 and we are discussing all the provisions as amended by Finance Act 2023. Hello everyone, I am C. Ridhima Bhatia and today, tomorrow and day after, that is the continuous 3 days, we'll be taking you through provision of TDS, TCS and advanced tax in common. So you can settle in and then we'll start with our class today. Just before we start, there are a few drills which I want you all to know is that please participate, ask as many questions as you want, and do response to them also. And one more thing, have a habit of reading the modules, have a habit of understanding the law itself because now you are final students. So more than anything, rely on your self study, your self understanding, and practice. Okay. So we'll start with the class. If you have any concerns, do not hesitate to drop it in the chat box. Good evening, Viraj. Good evening, Shailesh. Good evening, Namrata. Super. So it's a heavy topic. Why it's a heavy topic? I would say this chapter 13, deduction, collection, and recovery of tax is a very important topic from exam perspective, obviously, because it carries somewhere around 7 to 10 marks. And I have not seen an exam which in final has been there without the TDS chapter. I don't even remember that. But yeah, why it is even important practically, I am assuming you people have almost gone through a good 2.5 years of your training period, and you must have seen there is no single firm, there is no single entity where you have been working without TDS facility. I think TDS is some activity which is going on throughout the year, every day, every month. Day wise, when I say is that you have billing every day and you should know when to deduct tax. Every month you have deposits of it. Every quarter you have returns of it. And then you have certificates of it. So it's an ongoing process. Now let's make the best value addition here. So in this particular TDS chapter, friends, there are approximately sections 192 to 206 AD. These are not all the TDS sections. There are approximately TDS odd provisions of around 14 number, but around 26 are covered under this chapter, and others like 10, 15 are covered in different chapters respectively. So we'll be discussing what are the one which are covered under this chapter. Yes, the class today and maybe half of it tomorrow would be dedicated to TDS provisions solely, and then TCS and then advanced tax and other miscellaneous provisions. Okay, so let's begin. When I say TDS, what I know most of you have already practiced it, but let me just make you all familiar. Every income is earned in the previous year, but it is assessed and taxed in the assessment year. So if I talk about your previous year, which is previous year 23-24, it would be assessed in assessment year 24-25. But the thing is, the government cannot wait for the entire year to get over and then a period of it to come and file the return, and you give the particulars, you give the income tax, what is the amount due. They cannot wait. One is revenue would be delayed, and second is that information how much anyone is showing can be misinformed, correct? It can be misreported also. I may not show the true particulars. So they came up with the concept of pay as you earn, as in a concept which is there in income tax through advance tax. Matlab a person would pay advance tax in the previous year itself for the assessment year, but it would be paid in the previous year itself. अब इससे एक responsibility तो clear हो गया, that is finally getting the revenue. No problem. But again, we still are at a point where we want to know, matlab, the department wants to know what are the financial transactions happening during the year. What are the high value transaction? How would I ensure everyone is paying income tax or not? So they came up with different mechanism, which is tax deduction and collection. Here they put a responsibility on either the person making the payment or person collecting the payment to do all these compliances. So these compliances are necessarily not done for the assessee, but the person here are deductor and collector. So when we are doing TDS provision, we will assume ourselves as deductor. When we are doing TCS provision, we will understand ourselves as collector and understand those provisions. And obviously, when we are making payment of advance tax, that is obviously for the assessee done by himself. So if now I talk about TDS, let me just again give you a small briefing. X needs to make a payment to Y. X needs to make a payment to Y, say 1 lakh rupees. Okay. Now, X before making a payment has the liability to deduct a certain percentage as TDS, as tax deducted at source. Some people call it as a withholding tax also in common language. It's one and the same thing. So suppose they say I want to deduct 10%. I have to deduct 10%. So 10,000 would be deducted and net 90,000 would be paid. Net 90,000 would be paid. Now the question is for X, his cash outflow is 1 lakh and for Y, his inflow is 90,000. Correct. X is paying 90,000 to Y and 10,000 to government and Y is getting 90,000. Now how this is getting disbalanced? Now for actual thing, X का expense कितना है? 1 lakh का ही. For the payment he is making the expense is 1 lakh. It would not be accounted as 90,000 or 10,000. It would be accounted as 1 lakh. It's just that instead of giving it to Y, he has given 90,000 to Y and 10,000 to government on behalf of Y. This money is also of Y, but it has been deposited to third party, which is our government. And Y के लिए the income is not 90,000. You will not account income as 90,000. The income would be 1 lakh only. 90,000 is something which you have received in your bank account, and 10,000 is something which has gone to the government as your tax liability, which we call as TDS credit. So I know most of you must be thinking that this is very basic, but sometimes we do not get a chance to work upon TDS in our daily scenario. So this is what the TDS mechanism is. Any doubts, guys? Correct. Viraj, well said. Okay. So now, guys, TDS is not actually there on each payment. There are certain payments from section 192 to section 195, which has the mechanism of TDS. If my transaction is covered, that is, if my payment is covered in that particular section, then only I will make the deduction. If I'm not covered as per that section, I will not make the deduction. It's not that कि मेरा मर्जी किया तो I will deduct it and I will deposit it. No. For each transaction or each type of payment, there is a different section. Section 192 is for salary. Section 193 is for interest on securities. And there are multiple sections. So हर एक payment का there is one section. All you have to see in each section is the 5 things. The 5 questions. First of all, obviously, you have to see the nature of payment. Whether your nature of payment is falling in that section or not. This is extremely crucial concept. Then you have to see whether I am an eligible deductor or not. You may be a deductor from one perspective, as in you may be a deductor for one type of payment, but you may not be an eligible deductor for another type of payment. So eligibility of deducted is very important. Then whom I'm making the payment to, that is deductee. You can say them as payer payee also. It's one and the same thing. So the person making the payment is payer, which is who's the deductor, and the person to whom the payment is made is payee or deductee. Then obviously you have to see the rate, the threshold limit, the time of deduction. There are more than 5. So the time of deduction and ultimately if any other points. So I encourage all my students to make from day one a good table. You can make it from a center page. covering 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and obviously the section number as a chart, whereby it can be your personal revision segment where you have all this information intact. Okay, so these are all the type of questions which every section would answer, not one which every section would answer, covering the type of payment. Second thing, students, before we go to understand here who would be my deductor and deductee? Here in this example, where I gave an example of X, deductor would be X, deductee would be Y. Or you would say them payer and pay. But to do all these tedious compliances, the deductor has to obtain a number called TAN. TAN का full form क्या होता है guys? If you have done TDS, a number called TAN, which is a different number from PAN. PAN is there when you, as an assessee, represent yourself. TAN is there when you, as a deductor, representing yourself. What do you mean by TAN? Many people say tax account number, ma'am. Tax identification number. Okay, so this is again a general trivia. It's called tax deduction and collection account number. Tax deduction and collection account number. So it's a unique number which is obtained by a deductor if he has to do TDS compliances. Because I told you TDS compliances में क्या आता है? You have to deduct tax, you have to deposit tax, you have to file the return, you have to issue the certificate. So all these compliances are done under different account number, under different compliance number, which is TAN. When you do any compliance from assessee point of view, any provisions which you follow from an assessee point of view, you use PAN in income tax, but PAN is basically for deductors and collector when they have to do TDS TCS compliance. So, as I was saying, this chapter is obviously very important from practical point of view also. And as Viraj rightly said, that where there are tax audit provisions, there are certain deductions which are not allowed. How would government ensure that X do his liability of deducting TDS? They would put them in a place that if he will not do the liability, if he will not do his task of deducting TDS, he would be called assessee in default. So he has to deduct TDS and he has to deposit the TDS and obviously file the return and issue the certificate. Then only he would be said to have done all his tasks. But if he does not deduct the TDS where he is required to deduct TDS, or if he does not deduct the tax where he is required to deduct tax, or if after deducting tax, he does not deposit it to the government on behalf of Y, in this case, he would be called as assessee in default. Okay. Now, before starting my first section, which is section 192, some few things which you should know about TDS. First, in most of the scenarios, the time of deduction would be either payment or credit, whichever is earlier. I'm doing this right now so that I don't have to explain it again and again. Payment or credit, whichever is earlier. Guys, time of deduction मतलब, see, इतना तो sense है कि उसको पैसे देने से पहले we have to deduct the TDS before making the payment of before making the final payment to the payer, to the payee, sorry. Before making the final payment to the payee, the person has to deduct the tax. So most of the stages where you say before making the payment, but it can be before the credit also. Credit means I have to make someone a payment. That means I have to make them due in my books. Okay, due in my books. So that would happen when the services are provided or when the bill is received. Correct. So when I make a due entry, either then I have to make an entry to deduct tax, or when I actually pay, then I have to make an entry to deduct tax. The TDS is done at the time of deduction. Suppose in X books, in this case, what he would have done, suppose the payment is for professional receipts. So professional services is an expense. The professional services account debit to Y because he has to make him due to TDS payable. Out of 1 lakh of my expense, I only have to give 90,000 to Y, but 10,000 as a TDS payable liability account till the time I pay to the government. And if the same has to be done at the time of payment, what entry goes? Simple. It would be, you would have due Y with rupees 1 lakh. But bank say पैसा गया होगा of 90,000 to Y's account and to TDS payable of 10,000. Okay, this is a disclaimer that you have to bear with my handwriting also for the next videos. Correct? So it can be either on due basis or payment basis, whichever is earlier. Earlier मतलब या तो payment पहले दे रहे हो, advance payment if you're giving first, then you have to deduct tax at the advance payment. Credit if you're making first, as in bill has received first, or you're making it due in your books first, then you have to do at the time of due. Most of the sections would cover this. But there would be handful of 5-6 sections where TDS would be deducted, as in tax would be deducted at the time of payment, where tax would be deducted at the time of payment. Those are 5-6 sections which we will obviously remember. Then coming back to my X example, why I'm taking X example again and again? Because it will create a periphery for you to understand other examples. Now X has to obtain TAN, ये तो हमें समझ आ गया that X has to obtain TAN to do TDS compliances, and whatever he deduct, he has to deposit it with the government on behalf of the pay. Correct? Deductee. But how will government know that this belongs to Y? Oh, Y का नाम थोड़ी ना देगा this belongs to Mr. Y. What Y has to provide? His PAN number. Y has to give his PAN number to X. You will ask why? Obviously, we have multiple people who can have same names, almost same address, same identity. So PAN, which is our unique identification number for the income tax purposes, on that base, the TDS details goes to the government. The TDS details goes to the government. Now, if the payee does not provide PAN, there are repercussions. There are repercussions. अब आप बोलोगे why would payee would not tell the PAN? Because he might not want to tell his financial transaction information to the government, because this is like income has been generated. Now, why has to show it in his return of income? Correct? If he will not show it, he will get caught off. So that's why he may not want to pay PAN. So if the payee does not give the details of PAN, there are certain repercussions. That is, you have to, I'll give you an understanding. You, as a deductor, then instead of the rate which is specified in the section, you will deduct the tax at 20% of the rate, whichever is higher. Whichever is higher. So PAN is extremely important. And last thing before we proceed to the section, last two things before we proceed to the section, that TDS rates would be flat rates. They would not be the rate which you have to increase by cess and surcharge until and unless the payee is non-resident. Until and unless the payee is non-resident. All these rates are flat rates. If it is 10%, you have to deduct at 10%. If it is 15%, you have to deduct at 15%. There is no requirement to add surcharge or cess into it. But if you're making a payment to non-resident, then you have to add surcharge and cess accordingly. Got it, guys? Now, last thing before to ponder before you go and understand section 192. Suppose X did not deduct the tax. X was required to deduct the tax. He did not deduct it. And the repercussions are there in PGBP, no problem. But can Y say X did not deduct it? I will not deposit my liability. Can Y say that since, as in the payee says that he X did not, it was his liability to deduct my tax, he did not deduct, I will not deposit it. No, Y cannot say that. At the end of the day, if my tax is due and the other person has not deducted, then I have to pay it from my pocket. I have to pay it from my pocket. अब you will say कि मैम उसने deduct किया, but he did not show it in the credit of Y, then obviously he is a cessee in default. You can file a case and so on things. But Y at the end of the day is an assessee whose ultimate liability is to pay income tax on his income. If he does not pay so, he would again be at default. He would be again at default. So this is all for the understanding of TDS. I know many of you must be knowing all this basics, but for everyone unintended, this is the concept of TDS. TCS से related कोई भी doubt होगा, park it for tomorrow's class. Before we go into our next section, which is the first section, does anyone has any doubt? Can SSC apply for TAN voluntary? SSC as in deductee in this case. See, when you are eligible to deduct tax, as in when you have to deduct tax, you have to obtain TAN. Exceptions are there. You have to obtain TAN within 15 days from the end of the month in which the deduction is made. If you will not do it, then there is penalty. But can I do it voluntarily? Yes, I can do it voluntarily. And one TAN is there for all TDS sections, one TAN is there for all TCS sections. As in TDSO, TCSO, all sections के लिए one TAN is only there. I'll try to make the information as practical as possible so that it can be an enhancement for your post-qualification purpose also. चले आगे guys? Perfect. Simranjit, if he does not file the return, वहाँ पे there is fees on him. He has which would be equal to the amount of tax deducted. If he will not issue the certificate, then penalties and fees are there. So there are laws and provisions for repercussions. Great. It got hanged. So, पहला section, guys, first section of TDS is salaries. So whenever you're making a payment in the nature of salary, you have to deduct tax. Salary is what is salary? Salary is something which is chargeable under the head salaries. That is, there is an employer-employee relationship between the deductor and deductee. Everyone hands on with your notes. First question, obviously, section 192 covers salary. Who would be the deductor? Obviously, the employer. The employer would be the deductor. Resident ho या non-resident ho does not matter. The employer is the deductor, and when he's making the payment to the payer or payee, who is the employee, ये भी resident हो या non-resident हो does not matter. Till the time that salary is taxable in India and it is taxable under the head salary, you have to deduct tax. You have to deduct tax. The question comes on what amount the tax has to be deducted. So first of all, section 192 says when the amount is taxable under the head salaries and it is more than basic exemption limit, you have to deduct the tax. So maybe like my father, if has someone employed in his shop, he's paying 10,000 as monthly salary to them, but it is not more than the basic exemption limit. It's not more than the basic exemption limit. He's not deducting the TDS. But if you, me, anyone, even a personal household or anyone, if we are making payment for the purpose as an employer-employee relationship and it is more than the basic exemption limit, we have to deduct tax. But the most important question here is at what rate the tax has to be deducted and what time the tax has to be deducted. So guys, rate here is average slab rate. Ma'am, ये क्या है? बताते हैं. I'll let you know. And the question is at the time, the TDS has to be deducted at the time of payment. Not before that, at the time of payment. So when I'm crediting the salary in your account, I will deduct the TDS. Okay? So time का भी बात हो गया, payer का भी बात हो गया, pay का भी बात हो गया, rate का भी बात हो गया. Threshold limit I told you when the salary is more than basic exemption limit. Now all calculation comes to the point, which is average slab rate. Just 1 second. Let me see if I have that with me. The question is, I hope the Excel screen is visible. Since I am the employer, you are the employee, I know what is the salary which has to be credited during the year. Correct. So what the person does, he makes a computation. Who? The employer makes a mini computation for every employee. Our softwares, there are already are softwares there which makes that task easy. They make mini computations for every employee. Even if they have one employee, two employee, 3,000, 4,000, does not matter. Subtly, they prepare a mini computation for the entire year, that what would be on hypothetical basis of the information I have, what would be the salary for the entire year, what would be the tax on that salary for the entire year. So suppose I have this information with me where basic salary is 30,000 makes to 3 lakh 60 annually. HRA makes to 180. Let's assume everything is taxable. BA makes to 2 lakh 40,000 annually. Other allowances 2 lakh 40,000. 10 lakh 20,000 का salary हुआ minus 50,000 is my standard deduction, guys. Total salary income है 970. Tax on salary comes to normal tax rates is according, guys. 1,06,500. Obviously, I will add cess here, average tax slab rates. Add cess, total tax comes to 1,10,760. Now, 1,10,760 is the tax which is coming due on a taxable salary of 970. So, how will I deduct it? I will deduct this amount every month on average basis. That is 12 months are left from April. April से लेके March तक I will be making 12 salary payments, assuming I'm making it every monthly. So, assuming I'm making it every month. So, 1,10,760 divide by 12, that is 9,230 is the tax which I have to deduct. So, if I'm making this calculation in the month of April, I will deduct 9,230. The same will go when I will be making payment for the month of May. And now focus on the column F, G, H. Okay. Now, the same thing goes here. May be same computation rah. Annual salary remains the same. Taxable salary came the same. Tax came the same. Total tax came to 110,760. Obviously, in the previous month, I have already deducted taxes of 9,230. Okay. Remaining tax I have to deduct in 11 months. May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March. So 1,01,530 now has to be deducted by 11 months. So obviously again the average part would come the same, which is 9,230. Now suppose, and this will go on every month, 9,230. Now suppose the salary changed. He received some good amount in October. Diwali time, bonus came, taxable amount. Now the computation changed. I cannot go into the month of April, May and revise the computation. What will I do? Now for the month of October, the revised computation would be made. So suppose from the bonus, now the taxable salary increased to 10 lakh 20. Here guys, focus. The tax comes to 1,18,500, which cess comes to 1,23,240. Now, how much tax is already deducted? अब मैं average कैसे निकालूंगी? 123,240 में से already I'm deducting something every month. and that is 9,230 every month based on average salary. Correct? So, based on average tax. So, April, May, June, July, August, and September, 6 months, 9,230 has been deducted every month. The total is 55,380. Now, the remaining tax is 67,860. That would be deducted in how many months, guys? Next 6 months. So now from October onwards, the monthly deduction comes to 11,310. अब you will say कि मैम बोनस पहले ही सब पे पूरा टैक्स काट लिया. No. The maximum tax which he would be deducting is 1,23,240. No employer can deduct all of the tax altogether. He has to follow the average slab method. समझ आया guys? Now, the first question which must be popping in all of your mind is, ma'am, tax rate kaun sa lenge? Because this question was not there in anyone's mind before a couple of years. Now, the question is, what tax rate we have to follow? There is new scheme, there is old scheme. New scheme says, section 115 BAC says there are different rates and obviously different computation. And then there is old scheme, which is the provision which we are going for. Now, as we all know that 115 BAC from Finance Act 2023 has become a default regime. Default matlab, until and unless you opt out and take an option to old scheme, by default 115 BAC would be applicable. By default 115 BAC would be applicable, but how would I tell to the employer, do I want the new scheme, do I want the old scheme? I have to give a declaration at the beginning of the year that I am opting out of 115 BAC and I want to opt for the old scheme. He will deduct the tax as per that scheme. You cannot change the schemes during the year. Nahin, this month I want old scheme, this month I want new scheme. Whatever declaration you make at the beginning of the year, which is April, that declaration will go throughout. Now you will say, ma'am, if I've joined during the year, so then whatever declaration you're making at the time of joining, that would go throughout, which is new and old. If I will not give the declaration or somehow you missed giving it, then the tax would be deducted as per the default regime. Now the question you must be having again, can I change that tax towards the time of filing the return? Because ultimately you are the assessee, you are the employee. Iska tax I am deducting. Okay. I am supposed deducting as per the new scheme. Now, while filing the return, you think that old scheme is more beneficial to me. So yes, you can. You definitely can change the scheme while filing the return of income, because ultimately it is your income, your tax, and final option goes in the time of assessment year when you are assessing your income. And then before you start filling the return form, you have to select whether you have to go for new scheme or old scheme. New scheme may obviously certain benefits are not there, but it is more tax. The tax rates or the slab rates are more beneficial. Old scheme mein to it is something which you have been studying out entire time. Now, the question comes, suppose मैम उस पर्सन का और भी कोई इनकम है. Guys, definitely हो सकता है. If any person can has any other income also, I'm not denying the fact, you're not denying the fact. तब क्या होगा? First of all, the question comes, does an employee have to tell the details of his other incomes? No, it is not necessary. It is voluntary that if I tell the details of my other income, why would I be interested in telling the details of my other income? I I do not want the liability to deposit advance tax. Because if I will tell my other incomes to the employer, he will include it in the computation, and then whatever the tax he's calculating, he will calculate accordingly. This is again totally a voluntary choice of the employee whether they want to give the declaration of other incomes or not. So ये point तो हुआ on other incomes, whether I want to give the declaration on other incomes or not. But the question comes, What about losses? Can I declare losses also just like I declared income? No, you cannot declare losses just like you declared income. Only thing which you are allowed to declare is income. But yes, loss you can only declare under loss under the head house property. That is through interest on loan, which would be coming. Okay. Now the question comes again, कि ma'am, what about deductions, tax saving deductions? ये तो ऐसे खुद करता है. Yes, you have to give them the declaration which you give at the beginning of the year. What is your estimated declaration which you would be doing? Estimated tax saving investments which you would be doing. Estimated loss from house property which you would be incurring. Everything you have to give them at the beginning of the year. The deductions also through declaration, I have to tell that what is given between ATC to ATU, I would be making such investments on. HRA exemption, all of that you have to tell at the beginning of the year so that the tax computation can be done accordingly. Now, if you will tell your employer that these are my details of deduction, these are my details of income, he has to consider it. He will not say, "Chalo, main consider nahi kar raha, it is your liability." No, the employer, as in the deductor, has to consider it. If he will not consider it, it is a default on his hand, and ultimately then you have to file the return and pay the taxes. तभी कहते हैं कि always have a habit to see your payslips to see how monthly tax is calculated. A lot of us who do not have an expertise in income tax, we do not tend to check it, but do have a habit, especially when some package increase is happening during the year, or especially some bonus element or incentives are received during the year, do have a habit to check it. Now the question is, I'm saying कि declaration. So I can tell whatever amount I want to tell to my employer to reduce my tax liability, and he has to consider it. No. Ultimately, when the year end approaches, as in most of the organization has a habit of collecting such proofs from December onwards. Ultimately, when the end of the year is getting approached, then you have to give them the proofs. Then you have to give them the proof of such declarations which you made. So for house rent allowance, if you're claiming an exemption, then you have to give them the rent receipts, name, address, PAN, where the rent is more than 1 lakh. If you're claiming leave travel concession, you have to give them evidence of expenditure. That is, if you're going by airplane, give them the boarding pass, give them the invoice. If you're going by train, give them the final invoice. Whatever deductions you're claiming for house property, give them the interest certificate, which will ultimately have these three information: name, address, and of the lender. Then for deduction under Chapter 6, say any deduction, you have to give them the investment proofs, premium receipts for ATC, medical receipts for ATD, medical insurance receipt for ATD, donation receipt. All of those evidence you have to submit them as per company's policy. Okay, so the example which you were seeing on the screen is considered taking ATC, ATD, not ATC, ATD, it's considered taking other incomes of the assessee, and it's done in the same manner. Now, last aspect here is regarding dual employment, or dual employment as in it can be both the cases, that is from April to June, I am with one employer, then June onwards, I am with another employer. Or at the same time, I'm working with two employers. Both of the cases can be covered here. Now, yeah, sorry. So suppose I was with one employer for the period of April to June. Then I was with another employer for the period of July onwards. अब क्या हुआ? I did not want to share the information with my second employer about my first employment. I did not want to tell them about my salary. It is not compulsory. And as an employee, you are not forced to also. If you want to tell, you tell. If you don't want to tell, you don't tell. If you will not tell, there are some repercussions. Let me show you how. Now, suppose I am with employer 1 I gave my notice period, okay? And he did not deduct the tax. Why he did not deduct the tax? Because the salary was not crossing the basic exemption limit. So naturally, for 3 months, he did not deduct any tax and no deduction was made. But when I joined the new employer from July to March, when he made my computation, that was for increased salary from 85,000 to 1 lakh monthly. 9 lakh came as my salary minus 50,000 of standard deduction, 850 came. 82,500 tax increased by cess, 85,800. He deducted it every month. Fine. Now I was very relaxed. Okay, employer one has also done his work. Employer two has also done his work. Now when I will be filing my return of income, I do not have to worry. Why? Because everyone has done their taxes. But this is wrong. When I will be filing my return, I would be in a fit. Why? As an employee, when I will be filing my return, my total income is 11 lakh 55,000, 255 there and 9 lakh here. Total income from salary. 50,000 standard deduction and then tax which got calculated is 1 lakh 49,760. But TDS कितने का कट है? Hardly 8,500, 800 का which is done by employer. Two. So now tax liability is coming there to pay, which is 63,960. So I'll be in this deep thought, why this tax liability is coming? Employer one ने भी TDS काटा, employer two ने भी TDS काटा, then why? Employer one ने भी सारा calculation किया, employer two also did the calculation, then why this TDS liability is coming? The answer is both have considered common benefits again twice, as in both have considered standard deduction, which should be allowed as one. Both have considered the benefit of slab rates, right? Both have considered the benefit of basic exemption limit. So because of this, the problem is coming. So if you want to don't face this problem when you're shifting job from one employer to employee, you can declare your previous income as much as you want so that the taxes when employer two would be deducting he can take note of it. Otherwise, क्या होगा? You have to pay it from your own pocket, which otherwise also you are paying from your own pocket, but it would come as a liability at the time of filing of return, which would be increased by taxes also, by interest also, or you can pay it as advance tax, totally your choice. Okay, so this is all about TDS under the head salary. Guys, if you have any question, you can ask. Very good, Namrata. Jigar, no, base of division is not all the time 12. I hope that is clear. Because when I was deducting tax for April, I see कि कितने months का I have to deduct, कितने months में I have to deduct tax. I made it 12 as a denominator. When I was deducting tax for the month of May, I made 11 as a denominator. And then when I was doing it for October, I made 6 as a denominator. My obviously after considering the taxes which have been deducted during the year. Hmm. Mansha, here, even if a non-resident person is receiving salary, it would go under section 192. If you will not select, it would be 115 BAC, correct? No employee cannot say that do not deduct my TDS. If he is not doing, allowing you to deduct the TDS and deposit it from your own pocket, otherwise it would be disallowance for you. So 192, we say as such, question does not come so often, but again, this is a very important section from practical standpoint. So for summary, if any one of you is preparing the chart, Section 192 covers salary payment. A payer is employer, pay is employee. Resident, non-resident does not matter for both of them. Rate is average slab rate. Other incomes can be declared on voluntary basis by employee, and employer has to consider those incomes. Losses not to be considered except house property loss, and that too if given proof. Deduction, yes, have to be considered. If there are two employers, you have to, it is advisable. I will not say you have to, not mandatory, but it is advisable to disclose one of the employer's income to another so that such scenarios of double tax, double benefits of standard deductions, slab rates are not there, and unnecessary employee has to either paid through advance tax, or if he's so much not aware of the provisions, then at the time of filing of the return, he has to pay it from his own pocket. Then whatever is taxable under the salary and is more than basic exemption limit, every person who's an employer has to deduct tax. You have to tell the employer at the beginning of the year which scheme of taxation you're following. That is, you have to tell them from your perspective. No employer would not do it automatically for 115 BAC. बिना पूछे वो नहीं काटेंगे. Make sure that you give the declarations. You cannot change it during the year, but at the time of return filing, you have an option to change it. Okay, Namrata? Thank you so much, Jigar. Let's move on to the next section now. We have a lot to cover up, okay? Section 192A, premature withdrawal from employees' provident fund. करें? चलो. Settlement हर एक section से पहले we will summarize it. Yes, at the time of filing of return, Namrata, any employee can make the change of an option. बहुत मजा आएगा आज की क्लास में. TDS is personally my favorite also. Okay, now next is premature withdrawal from employees' provident fund, section 192A. That is, it is my second type of payment, which will attract TDS. Now, before going into the nitty-gritties of this sections, I hope you all know there is SPF, there is RPF, and there is URPF. If an employer-employee maintains it, these are all maintained by employer. There is PPF also, which is by assessee himself, but these are maintained by employer. This is for government employees, non-statutory corporations employee, PSUs, government employees के लिए basically universities का सबका statutory provident fund होता है, right? इसमें deposits are not deposits के लिए you get deductions are not taxable if it's employer contribution, and so on. URPF may, if employer is making the contribution during the year, it is not taxable. If an employee is making the contribution, it is not allowed as deduction under ATC. I hope you all remember. RPF में क्या होता है? This is what we have to consider. Employer contribution is not taxable to an extent of 12%, और अब वो नया provision आ गया 7,50,000 वाला. Okay. Employee contribution क्या होगा? When you're making contributions in RPF, it is eligible for deduction under ATC. ये सैलरी के प्रोविजंस है, ये 192A के नहीं है, ओके. एंड इंटरेस्ट ऑन एम्प्लॉयर कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन एंड इंटरेस्ट ऑन एम्प्लॉय कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन, interest on employee contribution not taxable, interest on employer contribution not taxable to an extent of 8.5%, so 9.5%. And another provision of 2,50,000 is there. But this is what is in general. URPF में क्या होगा? Whatever is withdrawn at that time, at time of withdrawal, this is time of when the contribution is made. Then the question comes at the time of withdrawal. At the time of withdrawal, guys, what happens? URPF के लिए it is written. Every contribution which is made into a provident fund would have employer contribution. ER मैंने लिखा है employee contribution. Interest on employer contribution, interest on employee contribution, which gets accumulated every month on month basis, and then because every month you have to make contribution to it. Okay. Now, जब the money is withdrawn from this, at the time of withdrawal, employer contribution gets taxed as salary. Interest on employer contribution gets taxed as salary income. एम्प्लॉय कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन मतलब मेरा खुद का पैसा कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन है, उसको मैं क्यों टैक्स करूंगी? दिस इज नॉट टैक्स्ड. एंड इंटरेस्ट ऑन एम्प्लॉय कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन गोज अंडर इनकम ऑफ अदर सोर्सेस. ठीक है, this is when URPF is withdrawn. Now you will say, ma'am, what is the difference between RPF and URPF? See, generally, guys, employee provident funds are like a trust. Okay, these are like a trust where these funds are maintained. Either you can open it through the EPF Act, government के पास under the scheme, or you can have your own fund, your own trust, and recognize it by the Commissioner of Income Tax. Once it is recognized, it is RPF. If it is not recognized, it becomes URPF. Okay. Why I'm telling you this? Because to understand 192A, understanding of taxability of income is very important. So, SPF में से बहुत ही बेनिफिशियल है, गवर्नमेंट एम्प्लॉयज के लिए होता है. कुछ भी विड्रॉ करोगे टैक्सेबल नहीं होगा. जब कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन कर रहे हो एटीसी के डिडक्शन है, मतलब इट्स अ गुड फंड. आरपीएफ भी इज ऑल्सो गुड फंड. एम्प्लॉय कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन इज नॉट टैक्स. एम्प्लॉय कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन पे एटीसी का रिडक्शन है. इंटरेस्ट इज ऑल्सो नॉट टैक्स. यूआरपीएफ में एट द टाइम ऑफ कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन no benefit is given. It is the employer contribution is also not taxed, but withdrawal के time पे everything becomes taxable, but अलग-अलग heads में जाता है. Employer contribution and interest goes under salary. Employee contribution goes, it is my own money which I'm getting back, and interest on employer contribution goes under income from interest on employee contribution goes under income from other sources. Got it? अब the question is, premature section कहता है 192A, premature withdrawal from employees provident fund. Now, premature withdrawal from employees provident fund ये कौन से फंड के लिए कह रहा है? SPF के लिए कह रहा है, RPF के लिए कह रहा है, और URPF के लिए. So this section particularly is talking about RPF. And obviously URPF also, but RPF in particular, because I did not tell you what happens when you withdraw from RPF. If you withdraw from RPF after 5 years of continuous contribution, why did I focus on 5 years? Because after 5 years of continuous contribution, if you're withdrawing any amount from RPF, it is not taxable. It is not taxable. But if you withdraw before 5 years, or if you withdraw before 5 years, or if you do not have a continuous contribution, I should say, of 5 years, you do not have a continuous contribution of 5 years. अब मैम इसका क्या मतलब हुआ? Continuous contribution of 5 years is very important. ऐसा हो सकता है कि I make contribution only in the first year and I'm withdrawing it after 6 years and you will say it is not taxable. नहीं. Continuous contribution of 5 years is important. That means both employer and employee should be continuously contributing for 5 years in the fund. So if that does not happen, or you withdraw it before 5 years, RPF is treated like URPF at the time of withdrawal. That means whatever amount you will withdraw would be taxed in this manner. This is written in my Part A 4th schedule. Okay. So in nutshell, if RPF is withdrawn before 5 years of continuous contribution, then it is treated as a URPF. The taxability is like URPF. Okay, that is employer contribution would be taxable as salary, employee entire employer contribution of all the years, entire interest would be taxable as salary and employer contribution, interest on employee contribution, income from other sources, and so on. So that means taxability is there. Taxability is there, then that's why section 192A is there. So this is if you're withdrawing before 5 years. अब हो सकता है कि मैम 5 years of continuous contribution means I have to stay with one employer for all the 5 years. No. Instead of staying with one employer for 5 years, you can shift. If you go to a new employer, you can shift your RPF account to another employer and continue the contribution for 5 years. Suppose if 5 years contribution is not possible because of, sorry, because of uncontrolled circumstances, like suppose business got shut, employer का काम बंद हो गया, employee got deceased, employee became physically incapable to do the work, whatever is the reason, then what will happen? Then this provision is not attracted. So can I say, if there is no 5 years of continuous contribution, or if you do not shift your provident fund balance to another new employer, if the 5 years has not been done, or if the circumstances are under your control and still you're withdrawing it before 5 years, then RPF would be taxable. अब वो कैसे टैक्स होगा? सैलरी में नहीं, अब क्योंकि अलग अलग ट्रीटमेंट है, कुछ सैलरी में जा रहे हैं, समथिंग इज गोइंग इन अदर सोर्सेज, सो टू कट इट शॉर्ट वी हैव मेड इट सिंपल. Question remains the same. Who would be the peer deductor? Obviously the fund. Any person, our fund employer obviously would be maintaining, or the trust would be maintaining. ठीक है? पे कौन होगा guys? Employee, correct? Resident, non-resident, no matter. TDS, TDS at the rate of 10%. Because some part is going under other provision, some part is going under other head. So avoid करने के लिए TDS is at the rate of 10%. Threshold, that is when the amount withdrawn is 50,000 or more. You all my guys are final year students here, and I now understand that if it is written 50,000 or more, what does it mean? And if it is written more than 50,000, what does it mean? दोनों अलग अलग है. 50,000 or more means even if it is 50,000, TDS would be deductible. More than 50,000 means 50,000 से ऊपर जब होगा, then TDS would be deductible. Okay. So here the limit is 50,000 or more. Then you have to deduct the tax at the rate of 10%. When has to be deducted? Time, at the time of payment. So SA 192A is only this much. But why I need to tell you the quick story is that you should know how a provident fund withdrawal is taxable and when it is taxable. So instead of going into different rates of salary, etc., they do it at 10%, etc. ठीक है, एक बारी 192A quickly देखो. And if there is any doubt, let me know. Thank you. I would have done it Simranjeet in Hindi, English, both, but strictly instructions to keep it in English. But I'll try to summarize whenever possible. Well, happy guys? Next section is now we go from 192A to 193, which is interest on securities. इंटरेस्ट ऑन सिक्योरिटीज में मैं और आप टीडीएस नहीं काटेंगे नाउ. So all of you, please make sure that you post this class, you give a good read to this chapter. It would definitely help all of us, okay? Me too. Now, interest on securities. Matlab, the nature of payment here is interest which is getting yielded from securities. Not any general interest, but an interest which is coming from securities. Securities can be bonds, debentures, preference shares, all of these which give securities, which give yield interest. That is interest on securities. I'm not talking about bank deposits. I'm not talking about any other else thing like your फिक्स डिपॉजिट्स एनीथिंग सिक्योरिटीज. ठीक है. सो यहाँ पे लेट मी फर्स्ट टेल यू द कॉमन थिंग which we all look for. Here, the TDS has to be deducted by any person when they are making payment to a resident person. From now on, the sections you will see will have a variation of resident and non-resident payee. So when you're making payment to a resident person, then you have to deduct a TDS under 193. Guys, one more thing from now on, if your payment is not covered under this section, does not mean it is not taxable in the hands of the person receiving that payment. It is taxable, but there can be certain exemption in the sections, or it would not be covered under this section. It can be covered under other section, but in no means it is not taxable. ऐसा नहीं है कि it will not be taxable. Okay. So now, when any person is making payment to a resident person for interest on securities, that would be obviously the issuer of those bonds or issuer of those security. That person has to deduct TDS at the rate of 10%. When the TDS has to be deducted? At the time of payment or credit, whichever is earlier. Payment or credit, whichever is earlier. You can make it in your note quickly, payment or credit, whichever is earlier. So as such, guys, there is no threshold limit. हाँ, कुछ जगह there is threshold written. I will tell you where. Otherwise, there is as such no threshold limit. But there are certain exceptions which it says कि आपका TDS नहीं कटेगा. So basic is whatever is coming in your mind, उसमें TDS कटेगा. Whatever security is coming in your mind, that would be tax deductible. But first, let me talk about debentures. Debentures पे interest कितना मिलेगा? हमें मिलेगा as a resident person who opened it the TDS की company. So if debentures पे I am getting interest by a public company, and I am an individual or HUF. So if a public company is paying interest to whom? To individual and HUF, and it is being paid through account paid check, then in that case, no TDS would be required if the interest is up to 5,000. So can I say the debentures पे limit of deducting of TDS is 5,000. If वो 5,000 से ऊपर होगा, then they have to deduct the TDS. Otherwise, they do not have to deduct the TDS. And also this 5,000 limit is only for individual and HUF pay. It is not for companies. As in, if one company is paying interest on debentures to another company, they will deduct the TDS definitely at the rate of 10% because as such, there is no threshold limit. कुछ जगह there is threshold limit, which I will tell you. So one such is when a public company is paying interest on debentures to individual HUF, and if the interest is up to 5,000 annual amount. These are all annual, your annual limits, okay? So if the interest is up to 5,000, no need to deduct TDS. More than that, you have to deduct the TDS on the entire amount. So when a threshold limit crosses, unless I will tell you specifically, you have to deduct the TDS on entire amount. जैसे 5,000 से ऊपर गया, so suppose 6,000 हुआ, you will not say कि TDS has to be deducted on 1,000. It has to be deducted on the entire amount. Next, there is no interest on securities, which is on securities, and when the interest is payable to LIC, GIC, or any subsidiaries of them. Then there is no interest on government securities. There is no interest on government securities also. So government जो securities issue करती है, उस पे भी there is, I'm saying no interest again and again, sorry. There is no tax on interest issued by government securities or issued tax on interest yield on securities issued by government. Tax on interest on securities issued by government. But exception है. Exception क्या है? When there are 8% saving taxable bonds or 7.75% saving taxable bonds of 2008 issue. 2003 issue तो I think अभी तक mature हो चुका होगा, so you don't have to remember. This denotes that government brought this issue in 2003, which had a rate of 8%. हाँ, 7.75% saving taxable bonds का issue which would be going on, which was issued in 2018 for users to subscribe. उस पे if the interest is more than 10,000 per month per annum, then the TDS is required. In general, government securities पे no TDS is required. Interest on government securities पे no TDS is required. But if the security is 7.75% saving taxable bonds of 2018 issue, specifically issue को भी remember रखना है, 2018 issue, the interest if exceeds 10,000 per annum, then only TDS would be deducted. Then only TDS would be deducted. So if I have to write exceptions here, no TDS on interest paid to LIC, GIC, insurance companies. No TDS on interest paid on debentures up to 5,000 by a public company to individual HF only. Then no TDS on interest on government securities, but there would be TDS exception में 7.75% taxable saving bonds of 2018 issue if the interest is more than 10,000. Then no interest on 54 EC bonds. You know what is 54 EC? The bonds generally see no interest on securities issued by public sector companies भी आएगा भी ऊपर. 54 EC में there are 4 types of bonds which are notified for capital gain exemption, NHAI, PFC, IR, ICL, वो सारे bonds पे interest yield होता है. They are taxable. Definitely they are taxable in the hands of the person who's receiving it. But on that, there is no TDS provisions. No TDS provision. They are interest on securities, but no TDS would be attracted. No TDS on national development bonds. ये सारी exceptions book में है, मैं कुछ भी अपने से नहीं बता रही guys, trust me. Then no TDS on demat securities. My board was crazy sometimes. Sorry guys. Very nice. बस ये कॉमन वाले हैं, ये आप याद रख लोगे, so this will help. Ma'am, do we have to remember? Yes, you have to remember 7.75% interest issue. अगर just एक small adjustment or small question comes out of it. Otherwise, interest on securities is very simple. No threshold limit in general, but ये 10,000 का एक लिमिट है और एक 5,000 का there is limit. Interest on securities पे इतना important questions also does not come. Manisha, no, resident only. Resident by resident, wherever Act says that they mean ROR only. तो LIC, GIC, इन सबको आप सिक्योरिटीज उन्होंने सब्सक्राइब किए, ठीक है, दे हैव इन्वेस्टेड इन सिक्योरिटीज, आई वुड बी पेइंग इंटरेस्ट टू देम, करेक्ट, उनको वेन एवर इंटरेस्ट इज बीइंग पेड टू देम एज इन दे आर द पे, you do not deduct the TDS. You do not deduct the TDS. LIC is life insurance companies, GIC is general insurance companies. Next section, guys, quickly coming to dividend. TDS on dividend. That is when you're making payment of dividend, then you have to deduct TDS under 194. Obviously, as sole proprietor, you and me would not be making TDS payment, dividend payment. Who would be making dividend payment? Who would be the payer, guys? Good morning, everyone. Focus. A domestic company. Who would be the payer? A domestic company. Who would be the pay? A resident person. अब जहां जहां रेजिडेंट है वहां वहां रिमेंबर करना है. हाउ टू रिमेंबर, मैम? सी एक्सेप्शंस लिखेंगे एट द एंड व्हेन वी आर डन. व्हाट आर द एक्सेप्शंस ऑफ section which covers non-resident also, because in most of the sections from now onwards they are generally resident, so we'll write exception ki kahan kahan non-resident be covered. Simple. And what are the exceptions where TDS time of deduction is at the time of payment? Remember at the beginning of the class I told you generally it is credit or payment, whichever is earlier. यहाँ पे भी गाइस डिविडेंड में भी एट द टाइम ऑफ पेमेंट ही है. डिविडेंड में भी इट इज एट द टाइम ऑफ पेमेंट. हु वुड बी द पेयर? डोमेस्टिक कंपनी. सो एनी फॉरेन कंपनी मेकिंग पेमेंट ऑफ डिविडेंड, सपोज माइक्रोसॉफ्ट इश्यूज मी अ डिविडेंड, they would not deduct TDS under 194. I'm again not saying that it would not be taxable in my hand, but they are not required to deduct TDS under 194. They are foreign companies. यहाँ पे domestic company has to deduct TDS. Okay. At the time of payment at the rate of 10%. Quickly fill in the column payer domestic company, pay resident person at the rate of 10%. Threshold limit, again, as such, there is no threshold limit, but there is one exception. That is when a domestic company is making payment to an individual shareholder. When a domestic company is making payment to an individual shareholder, number, guys, one second. My board is not working. Sorry. Domestic company making payment to an better individual shareholder, and the dividend is up to 5,000. Dividend is up to 5,000 and it is paid in any mode other than cash. Then no TDS. So this you can write in other exception column. Then there would be no TDS. As such, if any domestic company is making payment to any resident person, and it is a dividend, be it under section 222A, B, C, D, E, does not matter, but TDS would be deducted. But if a domestic company is making payment in the nature of dividend to an individual and the dividend is up to 5,000 paid in any mode other than cash, no TDS is required to be deducted. Also, just like interest on securities, if you're making payment to LIC, dividend payment to LIC, GIC, or a dividend is paid to business trust by SPV or to any person which the government notifies, then there would be no tax deduction at source by the payer. LIC JIC का सिंपल सा रीजन ये है कि these were earlier government owned entities, so government का TDS काट के government को ही देना did not make sense. And LIC GIC का main source of income is obviously from these interest and dividend only. And business trust by special purpose vehicle, special SPV, when they make payment to business trust in the nature of dividend, that is exempt in the hands of business trust. So when the income is exempt in the hands of business trust, so obviously no TDS makes sense. 193 and 194 को कैसे याद करना है? 193 की एक्सेप्शन से याद करनी है. दोनों का TDS rate is 10%. Both includes now resident person. 193 includes payment of credit, whichever is earlier. 194 includes only at the time of payment. Exceptions मैंने बता दी. इंडिविजुअल्स के लिए एक में इंडिविजुअल एचयूएफ के लिए लिमिट है 5000 की. यहाँ पे ओनली इंडिविजुअल्स के लिए लिमिट है 5000 की. एचयूएफ पे देयर इज नो लिमिट. Go through both 193, 194. And before going on break, I will cover 194A, then we will go on break. एक बार go through करो guys. Payer, domestic company, pay resident person. जरूरी थोड़ी ना है कि डिविडेंड सिर्फ इंडिविजुअल्स को मिलता है. डिविडेंड कैन बी रिसीव्ड बाय एनीवन हु इज इन्वेस्टिंग एज अ शेयर होल्डर. मंशा जो भी हमने एक्सेप्शन पढ़ा, दैट वाज फॉर डिविडेंड paid by the SPV to the business trust. ठीक है. So now, final, before we break, one last and one very important section. Interest other than interest on securities. And this section covers every type of interest. When a friend paying interest to another friend on loan taken, that is also interest. Okay. What any type of interest which you think of can be covered here. Yes, there can be exception under this section, but think of any interest. Interest on income tax refund, maybe that might be also covered here, but maybe under exception. Interest on partner's capital, interest on loan, home loan, interest on bank loan, interest on anything, interest on saving back deposits. It is a very wide section to cover interest, okay? Which is other than securities. Securities पे interest होगा, that will go under 193. But other than securities का interest होगा 194A. अब यहाँ पे before we go into the depth of 194A, you have to remember a few things, guys. The payer pay concept. अभी तक just 1 second, guys. 1 second. So sorry, students, so sorry. Actually, so sorry. Some emergency came in. Yeah, live, right? Yeah, I'm so sorry. Coming to the topic 194A. यहाँ पे, first of all, there is a twist from now onwards in the context of payer and pay. Payer is any person. Abhi, I'll put a star here. And pay is resident person. So अभी तक section 192 में if I talk about payer, it was employer. 192A में payer, it was my trust or the employer who is maintaining the provident fund. 193 में obviously it is security, so it would might be most of the cases में companies. 194 में obviously dividend again companies. But now the situation changes. Interest has a very broader meaning. So payer here would be any person who is making interest payment, who is making interest payment. You, me would also be covered here. Technically, if any person is written, yes. But since this star is donated, why it is donated? Because let's just face the fact that TDS, when compliances of TDS fall on you, it's a tedious thing. TDS matlab TIDEOS wala, matlab there is a lot of work to be done. You have to deduct TDS, you have to deposit TDS, you have to file the return, you have to issue the certificate. So naturally, a lot of compliance burden is there on all of us. So to address this, they say that every person has to deduct the TDS, whether it's you, me, HUF, AOP, BOI, firms, anyone. But let's just face it, it would unnecessarily create a compliance burden. So except individual and HUF. मतलब individual and HUF are excluded. That is, if they are making payment of TDS, if they're making payment of interest, they're not required to deduct tax. I say not completely, but small taxpayers, that is individual and HUF, who in the preceding year, who in the preceding financial year has a turnover less than 1 crore in case they're doing business, or gross receipts in less than 50 lakhs in case they're into profession. So let's focus on this exception for a second. Who are we talking about? We are talking about that every person has to deduct TDS if they're making payment in the nature of interest. But individual and HUF would not be covered if they are the people who in the preceding financial year have a turnover of less than 1 crore or gross receipt of less than 50 lakhs. इसको याद करेंगे, but इसका concept क्या है? So that they, small taxpayers as an individual and HUF, can be relieved of the burden of TDS compliances. Now the question comes, which you would have in your mind, ma'am, preceding financial year. Preceding financial year means I am deducting TDS during the financial year as in the previous year itself. So if I'm deducting TDS for the previous year, 23-24, which year turnover I have to see? The criteria is financial year 22-23. Previous year 23-24 may I have the turnover, I do not have the turnover, does not matter. If in the financial year 22-23, my turnover is less than 1 crore, I will not deduct the TDS on, or I am not eligible to deduct tax on payments of interest made in previous year 23-24. अब हाँ, अगर 23-24 में my turnover crosses more than 1 crore, then in the context of payments which would be made in the upcoming year, which is previous year 24-25, usme if interest payments are there, then I have to deduct the TDS. So first thing first, guys, first you have to see what is the payment nature, and then you have to see whether you are an eligible deductor or not. If you're not an eligible deductor, just move out. Don't need to see other provisions. Okay? So this is very important. Most of the people say, अगर tax audit नहीं करना. नहीं, this is wrong thing. Act says if the turnover is less than 1 crore or gross receipts are less than 50 lakhs in the preceding financial year. मैम अगर हमारा turnover ही नहीं है, मतलब हम business ही नहीं करते, then you're not covered under these provisions. Business है, turnover less है, तब you are covered. आप salaried individual हो, चाहे आपका salaries हाँ whatever amount, but you are not covered under these provisions. So if I'm a salaried individual, I am not eligible to deduct tax on interest payments made because I'm not eligible deductor. Okay, so this point, why I'm focusing here, because this point is there almost in all the upcoming sections. So if this point is clear, we will move forward. Clear? Pay. Got it? Point out? Okay. Next is, what is the rate? Rate, my friend, is 10%. Rate is 10%, that if you're making interest payment, you have to deduct TDS at the rate of 10%. But what is the threshold limit? So threshold limit in general, there are three threshold limit here. Pe. General threshold limit is 5,000. That is, if the interest is more than 5,000, then only have to deduct the TDS. So suppose I am a person doing business. Last year my turnover was 2 crores. I've taken a loan from my friend for business purpose. I have to pay interest on it, and that interest is more than 5,000. I will deduct the TDS. Or second limit is 40,000 or 50,000. I should write both. Sorry. 40,000 or 50,000 if the payment is made by bank, cooperative societies, cooperative banks actually, and post office. Matlab, if post office is making the payment to another person, then the limit is 50,000. If the person is resident senior citizen, if the person is not a resident senior citizen, general person hai, so the limit is 40,000. These limits are per payer, per pay. मतलब बैंक इंटरेस्ट पेमेंट 50,000 से ज्यादा अलग अलग लोगों को कर सकता है, बट 50,000 per pay. Bank making payment of more than 40,000 of interest, then only they will deduct the tax. Time of deduction, guys, यहाँ पे भी due or paid, whichever is earlier. Time is due or paid, whichever is earlier. Now the question are, what are the points यहाँ पे बहुत सारे exceptions हैं, बहुत सारे. We'll pick one by one. We'll discuss one by one. Then I will take up your questions. ठीक है? सबसे पहले exceptions under section 194A. The biggest exception under 194A is the limit पे पहले बात करते हैं. So I told you the limit is per bank per pay. We are the person who is the person who is receiving the interest, and bank is the person making the payment. Limit क्या है guys? 40,000 or 50,000 if the payee is a resident senior citizen. The bank कब interest पे करेगा? On deposits. Bank हम लोगों को कब interest पे करेगा? On deposits. Deposits, कुछ deposits. Time deposits. Time deposits क्या होते हैं guys? Time deposits are like FD, fixed deposits, recurring deposit, which are there for a time. एक होता है demand deposits, which is like my saving bank. Saving bank is not covered here. Saving bank is not covered here. These are all time deposits, मतलब fixed deposits हो गया या recurring deposits हो गया, which we do with bank. उस पे per pay, if the interest is more than 40,000 or 50,000, they will deduct it. And the limit is per bank, not per branch. एक core banking solution software अब जब डला है जब से, the limit is per bank. For example, ICAI, Kotak Mahindra, and HDFC. Okay. I have FD with all three of them. ICICI pays me interest of 30,000 on FD per year. Kotak gives me 10,000, and HDFC gives me, say, 45,000. ठीक है, दिस इज माई FD इंटरेस्ट फॉर द ईयर. हु विल डिडक्ट द TDS? ओनली HDFC वो डिडक्ट द TDS. मुझे इंटरेस्ट 50,000 से ज्यादा है और 40,000 से ज्यादा है, डज नॉट मैटर. Who has to deduct the TDS? Bank has to. So they will see per payer limit. If it is per pay limit, if it is crossing 40 as interest, TDS deducted. If it is not crossing 40 as interest, TDS not required to be deducted. So here only HDFC is required to deduct the TDS, even if my total interest is obviously more than 40, but that is not a criteria. But now let's change the situation where HDFC has 3 branches. Suppose one branch is in Delhi, another is in Mumbai, and third is in Chennai. ठीक है, तीनों में मेरा ही अकाउंट है, 3 FD चल रहे हैं. मैं आई हैव टेकन दिल्ली, मुंबई, चेन्नई, मतलब मुंबई की कोई ब्रांच में, चेन्नई की कोई ब्रांच में. ठीक है, अब दिल्ली ब्रांच इज पेइंग मी इंटरेस्ट ऑफ से 15,000 FD का, मुंबई ब्रांच इज पेइंग इंटरेस्ट ऑफ से 20,000, and Chennai branch is paying again, say, 25,000. Now, will they deduct the TDS? The answer is yes. They would deduct the TDS even if per branch I am not having a TDS of more than 40, interest of more than 40,000, but in cumulative, because of core banking software, because of core branch banking solution software, now they have to deduct it. So it is per bank, per pay limit. Got it? अब वो FD है, RD है, डज नॉट मैटर, इंटरेस्ट नॉमेनक्लेचर है, दे हैव टू डिडक्ट द TDS. सेविंग बैंक पे दे विल नॉट डिडक्ट द TDS, एंड सेविंग बैंक का लिमिट आल्सो वुड नॉट बी कंसिडर्ड टू डिडक्ट द TDS. Got it? Okay. What are the other exceptions? So other exceptions, my friend, as I told you, first is no TDS on interest on saving bank. Interest earned on saving bank deposit. Then no TDS on income tax refund. No TDS on interest of income tax refund. Even if वो TDS है, but वो exception में cover है. No TDS on interest on partnership interest. So the firm paying interest on capital, they would not deduct the tax. Then एक common चीज है, and it is there, no TDS on interest paid to bank, cooperative banks, LIC, UTIs, फाइनेंशियल कॉर्पोरेशंस. अब यहाँ पे अब आपको लगा होगा दैट मैम व्हेन वी टेक होम लोन और एनी लोन, एनी ओडी, हम बैंक को इंटरेस्ट पे करते हैं, राइट? वी पे इंटरेस्ट टू बैंक. सो यू मस्ट बी थिंकिंग दैट मैम वी शुड deduct the interest on deduct the tax on it. Technically yes, but since it is covered under exception, you do not deduct it. So even if you're paying interest, obviously on loans of more than the interest amount goes more than 40,000. But since the pay is bank, cooperative banks, LIC, UTIs, financial corporations, they are covered under exceptions. That's why you do not deduct tax on such interest. But NBFCs, guys, NBFCs are not covered. So when I'm taking a loan from any NBFCs like India Bulls or DHFL is not there, suppose your Bajaj Finance, these are all NBFCs. When I am making payment of interest to them and it is more than 40,000 and I'm an eligible deductor, I have to deduct the tax. I have to deduct the tax. Last point in this is of cooperative societies. So what happens? Cooperative societies अपने मेंबर्स को या तो इंटरेस्ट देती हैं, ठीक है, या दूसरी कोऑपरेटिव सोसाइटीज को इंटरेस्ट देती है, राइट? और वाइस वर्सा इट वर्क्स. और कोऑपरेटिव बैंक या कोऑपरेटिव सोसाइटी को दे रहे हैं, राइट? So cooperative societies, when they are paying interest to another cooperative society or to the members of the cooperative society, generally do not deduct the TDS on interest. But if but if इनका turnover is more than 5 crores, sorry, more than 50 crores, and interest is more than 40 or 50,000 as the case may be, then they will deduct the TDS. Then TDS मतलब सिंपल है, अगर कोऑपरेटिव सोसाइटी का टर्नओवर इज मोर देन 50 करोड़ इन द preceding financial year and interest paid is more than 40,000, then they have to deduct the TDS. Otherwise, they do not have to deduct the TDS. Otherwise, they would be covering under exception. So, small cooperative societies giving interest to members or to any other cooperative societies do not deduct that. But if they have a good turnover and the interest is obviously crossing the threshold limit, then they will deduct tax. Got it? Okay. So let me tell, this is about interest on other than interest on securities. Quickly revision 194A ka. 194A covers interest other than interest on securities. Who is the payer? Any person except individual HUF who in the preceding year does not have a turnover of more than 1 crore in case of business, and more than 50 lakhs in case of professions. Three, any person. Lastly, turnover is important. They say turnover does not matter. No TDS in general up to a limit of 5,000, but if the payer is bank, cooperative banks, post office, the limit is 40,000 or 50,000 if the payee is a resident senior citizen. Limit is per bank, not per branch, and it is per pay. Exceptions, saving bank interest not covered, income tax in refund interest not covered, partnership interest not covered under this, zero coupon bonds interest is not covered, interest paid to banks, cooperative banks, financial corporations, LICs, UTIs are not covered, NBFCs definitely are covered. Interest paid by cooperative society to its member or another cooperative society not covered until and unless the turnover of the cooperative society who's a payer is more than 50 crores and the interest is more than 40,000 per annum. Sorry, so my handwriting is bad. Plus, this board, which is my digital pad, is not working correct. So, this is about your interest other than interest on securities. Saving bank interest पे सिमरन जी TDS नहीं कटता. There is no TDS on saving bank interest. If a deductor is a salaried person, he is not covered under this provisions. Limit is for the entire year, Namrata. Yes, you can say that. Got it? It's clear? So we'll get back in next 10 minutes. Please do have something to eat, take a break, and we'll be back soon. Thank you. So guys, welcome back, and I hope all the doubts up till 194A are clear. Just in case there are still doubts, do let me know towards the end of the class. Okay? So now we proceed to understand some more. I'll skip B and BB for the time being. BA also for the time being. थोड़ा सा कुछ इंटरेस्टिंग करते हैं, मतलब इंटरेस्टिंग वो भी है गाइस, बट लेट्स गो विद द फ्लो ऑफ अंडरस्टैंडिंग रेजिडेंट रिलेटेड सेक्शंस. ठीक है? जितने भी whatever we are discussing, based on that you can easily do all the illustrations in relation to that topic. So it's a request and a sincere one that please do attempt it. Okay? So now we start with 194C. Please settle in and we'll start. The most common one, the most important one also, and sometimes the most misunderstood one also, is section 194C. TDS on contract or contractual payments. The first and the most important thing to understand here is what is contract, what type of payments are covered here, but that will take us into a long time and a long discussion. यहाँ पे बहुत बहुत छोटे छोटे misconceptions हैं in this entire section which I tend to now clear. सबसे पहले guys, let's answer first those basic questions and then we'll move into the depth of it. 194C. Who would be the pair here? The pair I would say is contractee. Now you will say, ma'am, what is contractee? यहाँ पे ये confusion हो गया और payee would be the contractor. अब बोलोगे कि मैम व्हाट आर यू सेइंग, ये क्या मतलब हुआ कॉन्ट्रैक्टर कॉन्ट्रैक्टी? सिंपल सा थिंग है ना, एक्स गिव्स अ वर्क टू अ कॉन्ट्रैक्टर मिस्टर वाई टू पेंट हिज ऑफिस. सो वाई इज द कॉन्ट्रैक्टर हियर, राइट? नॉट एक्स. Y is the contractor here, which by default is becoming the payee, which by default is now deducting. So suppose I give Y my construction work. Okay, so X is making payment to Y for a construction work, and Y is further making payment to, say, Z, who whitewashes or who do the normal repairs. So this is called payment to subcontractor. Y making payment to subcontractor is also covered under section 194C, and X making payment to Y, which is the contractor, that is also covered under 194C. So pair are the one who is making the payment, who would be contract in this case. Why I'm telling you this term? Because sometimes if you are reading it and you read it as it's written, ma'am, payment to contractor. But ma'am, you did not say ki payer. So say you do not get confused. That's why I've made it clear that who is a contractor and who is a contractee. Naturally, payer is the contractee and the deductor in this place. फास्ट चलेगा, आई होप हैंग हो रहा है ना? फाइन. So this is also clear. Ma'am, does all deductor, all contractee or all pair are covered here? No, यहाँ पे भी same आएगा. Any person can be a pair, but Individual and HUF would be covered only if they have the turnover, just like the one which we discussed there. They have a turnover of more than 1 crore in the preceding financial year, or gross receipts more than 50 lakhs in the preceding financial year in case of profession. Tabhi they would be eligible, otherwise they would not be eligible. Or you can say either way also, any person is required to deduct TDS under 194C, but individual and HUF would not deduct TDS in the preceding financial year. They have a turnover of less than 1 crore or gross receipts of less than 50 lakhs in case of profession. Both the ways are same. Ultimately, crux ये है कि individual HUF तभी काटेंगे TDS when their uh, limit of business or profession in the preceding financial year have crossed, which is 1 crore or 50 lakhs respectively. ठीक है? Contractor here again is any resident person. ठीक है? So यहाँ पे अगर आप contractual payments non-resident को दे रहे हो, it would not be covered under 194C. Rates are also pretty interesting. यहाँ पे बहुत सारी छोटी छोटी चीजें guys. Rates पे बात करते हैं. Rate is 1% or 2%. Now you will say when 1%, when 2%. So 1% when the pay is individual or HUF, and 2% when it is other than individual HUF. Pay, मतलब जिसको payment कर रहे हो. The person to whom you are making the payment, if that person is individual HUF, 1%. If the person to whom you are making your payment is other than individual HUF, it is 2%. Okay. Then comes the most important thing here is the threshold limit. थ्रेशोल्ड लिमिट पे जाने से पहले टाइम भी यहाँ पे सेम है गाइस. पेमेंट ऑफ क्रेडिट विच एवर इज अर्लियर. पेमेंट ऑफ क्रेडिट विच एवर इज अर्लियर. थ्रेशोल्ड लिमिट यहाँ पे इज एक्सट्रीमली इंटरेस्टिंग. थ्रेशोल्ड इज 30,000 in case of single transaction or aggregate during the year more than 30,000 or aggregate during the year more than 1 lakh. मैम ये क्या लिखा है? So if per service as in per bill the amount exceeds 30,000, then you have to deduct the TDS, or when the aggregate amount of payment made during the year or the credit during the year exceeds 1 lakh, then you have to deduct the TDS. Ma'am, clarity. Let me just give an example. So these are the details of all the payments made by. Let me pick up your illustration only. Which is here. These are all the payments made by ABC Limited to Mr. X, a contractor, for contract work carried during the year. 20,000 on 1st May, 25,000 on 1st August, 28,000 on 1st of December, and 1st March 2024 को 30,000 is due to Mr. X on contract work. अब सबसे पहले, since each transaction is less than 30,000, you will see कि नहीं आएगा result. But यहाँ पे create a accumulated balance method. 20,000 पे would you deduct the TDS? No. 25,000 पे would you deduct the TDS? No. 28,000 पे would you deduct the TDS? No. But at the same time, see accumulation also, that when 25,000 was paid, the net payment made during the year, the total payment made during the year comes to 45. Then again, when 28 का payment was made, then अभी तक भी it is 73. Okay. Then next maybe 30,000 the payment is made. Now it is not exceeding 30,000. Technically, you should not deduct the tax here also. But because of this 30,000 payment, the aggregate of the account of Mr. X now crosses to more than 1 lakh. Now crosses to more than 1 lakh. So in this case, we will deduct the tax. We will deduct the tax. Now the question comes, how much tax has to be deducted? The moment it goes to the 30,000 payment, the total or the aggregate of the payment made during the year crosses 1 lakh. The entire amount comes to 1 lakh 3,000. Correct? The TDS have to be deducted. I told you whenever the threshold crosses, the tax has to be deducted on the entire amount. So the naturally tax has to be deducted on 1,03,000. So the tax which here would be deducted is 1,030. It would be deducted from which payment? This will be deducted from 30,000 payment. 1,030 would be deducted and net payment of 28,970 would be made to the person. अब इसी एग्जाम्पल में to make you more understand, let's assume that this 25,000 payment was not 25, this was 35. Now, in this example itself, on the first payment, will I deduct TDS? The answer is no. So 20,000 payment, zero deduction of TDS. Tax pura gone is, nothing gone as tax. 20,000 full payment, correct? Net payment. Then up 35,000 will I deduct the TDS? The answer is yes, because the amount is crossing 30,000. So इस पे मैंने tax कितने का deduct किया होगा guys? 350 का. 350 का tax would have deducted and 35,000. I would have made a net payment of 34,650. Okay. Then now अब यहाँ पे 1 लाख अभी क्रॉस नहीं हुआ, 20, 35, 55 चल रहा है. Then ये 20,000 का एक और पेमेंट आएगा. इस पे will I deduct the TDS? Neither the bill is crossing more than 30,000 and neither the aggregate now in the account is more than 30,000. So this I will not deduct the TDS. On this 28,000, I will not deduct the TDS. Now, the new payment of 30,000, which is now being made on the March 2024, यहाँ पे now the story would be more clear to you guys. On this 30,000, the moment this 30,000 got added, the net aggregate during the year, why I'm using net again, the aggregate payment during the year now exceeds 1 lakh. Now it comes to plus 28 है ना? Plus 30. Okay. Now it comes to 1,13,000. 1,13,000. Okay. So technically you will say कि ma'am 1,13,000 pay, you deduct the TDS of 1%, which would come to 1,130, and then you deduct it from 30,000 and make a payment. I would say this is wrong. Why? Because a total 1,13,000 में, 1,13,000 का TDS has to be deducted. But already from 1,130 total में से already 350 has been deducted at the earlier stage when the bill was crossing 30,000. So यहाँ पे out of 1,130, 350 has already been deducted. So all I have to deduct is 780, which is the net, the total of bills on which no TDS was deducted, which is 20 plus 28 plus 30. So 780, I will deduct the TDS and then I will make the net payment of 2,9,220. Sorry guys, the board is not working right today and it is giving a lot of you attention problem. So sorry, but it is 2,9,220. I even worry that what will happen in the tomorrow's class because Sunday no one prepares it also. Let me see. इतनी भी बुरी राइटिंग नहीं है मेरी गाइस. ओके. अब क्लैरिटी आई इलस्ट्रेशन 6 की वजह से एंड दिस एग्जाम्पल की वजह से. एक बार इस एग्जाम्पल को देखो, कहीं पे भी डाउट है गाइस, लेट मी नो. ठीक है, अब आगे बढ़े. No, it will never show discrepancy for this ad hoc. Never. And most of the people always ask me, ma'am, if we have deducted more TDS, will that be a problem? It will not be a problem. Some people have a habit to deduct TDS at 1% from the starting itself. They think that why even go into the problem of seeing when it is crossing 1 lakh or when the bill is crossing 30,000. They deduct it from the first day itself and no one questions. Then also it is okay. As long as they're depositing it, no one would query, would make a point out of it because the amount is less. Amount, and the percentage is hardly 1%. Okay, so that's why. But practically क्या हो रहा है? That has a bit tweaking from what the law says. Okay, समझ आ गया ये 1 लाख वाला पॉइंट और ये वाला एग्जाम्पल इज rather very important than illustration 6 also. You can make note of it if you want to. Then we'll move forward in understanding the more aspect. Okay, so now if TDS is not deducted तो PGBP में guys वो expense disallow हो जाता है, tax audit report में report होता है. Mansha, there are two ways to do it. Either you pick up the payments on which tax is not deducted, or you pick up the entire amount and see what was the tax deducted earlier, reduce it. Both the ways are correct. दोनों में से जोन सा तरीका आपको लगता है आप वो कर सकते हो, विच एवर यू फाइंड राइट. Okay, guys, now everyone on the screen, again, an important concept. What type of payments are contract? Just because we say we are bounded by contract, does that mean all the types of contract payments are covered here? So basically यहाँ पे दो types of contract है, एक contract of work and एक labor contract. Work contract and labor contract. Work contracts and labor contracts. I understand that you must have studied it in your GST also, but this is from income tax perspective. Labor contract means where you agree to supply manpower. Like suppose I have a contract with an agency, they would give me security guards for my office premises. So that is called labor contract. Work contract में क्या क्या आएगा? So work contract is any contract of work, but डेफिनेशन एज पर 194C इंक्लूड सर्टेन आइटम्स के ये तो डेफिनेटली वर्क कॉन्ट्रैक्ट है ही है. बाकी है या नहीं, जैसे बाकी कंस्ट्रक्शन इज अ वर्क कॉन्ट्रैक्ट, एनी कॉन्ट्रैक्ट ऑफ सर्विस नेचुरली कम्स अंडर वर्क कॉन्ट्रैक्ट until and unless it's a professional or a technical service. Until and unless it's a professional or a technical सर्विस. बाकी कोई सर्विसेज जैसे जनरली आ जाती हैं, दैट इज वर्क कॉन्ट्रैक्ट. टाइपिस्ट का सर्विस इज अ वर्क कॉन्ट्रैक्ट. देन accounting ka service, if not technical, it is a contract, work contract. So both the things are included here. But definitely as per 194C, ये जो पांच छह items हैं ये work contract है ही है. That means they cover or they are included in the definition of work, and hence any payment made for such types of work would be covered under the provision of 194C. सबसे पहले advertising. If I'm making payment for advertising, that would come under 194C. Suppose I want to advertise my office ad in a newspaper. I am making payment to the Times of India. That is covered under 194C. Sponsorship fees are also advertising, right? Sponsors होते हैं ना, उसके लिए अगर मैं sponsorship fees pay कर रही हूँ, that is advertising and that would come under work contract. Then second is broadcasting and telecasting, including production of programs for such broadcasting and telecasting. मतलब ये भी मेरा वर्क कॉन्ट्रैक्ट है गाइस. अगर मैं कोई प्रोग्राम प्रोड्यूस कर रही हूँ या कुछ उसको टेलीकास्ट कर रही हूँ, टेलीकास्ट मीन्स ऑन टेलीविजन, ब्रॉडकास्टिंग जनरली मीन्स ऑन रेडियो. सो When the payment is made to the production person, that comes under the meaning of work contract. For example, the channel. Who would make the payment? The channel makes the payment. The channel makes the payment to the production. ऐसे चलता है generally. Channel production house payment करते हैं. Production house actors, actresses जो भी involved होते हैं, they make the payment to them, and that is how the flow works. Channel gets money through advertisement. So that is how the whole uh, entertainment industry works. So यहाँ पे there is one circular also for the payment of production of content. उस पे I will come, but हाँ, broadcasting and telecasting के लिए if I'm making the payment, that is also work contract. Carriage of goods or passengers by any mode of transport other than railways के लिए if I'm making the payment, that is also covered under work, and hence it is 194C deductible. Ma'am, what do you mean by carriage of goods or passengers by any mode? अरे ट्रक से सामान इधर से उधर भेजना है, that is I'm making payment for carrying goods from there to here. I am, what do you say? I have paid to a bus agency for the employees. They would take my employees to a seminar. So that is also payment for passengers. Even if as a person I'm making payment to any railways, or railways are not covered, to any say taxi wala, or to any you can say to airplanes, that also comes under 194C because that is work. अब आप क्यों नहीं TDS काटते हैं? I will come to that. Catering. Catering मतलब खाने पीने का होता है. If you get catering done, you're making payment for that. Catering में generally they come with all the utensils, they make it, and then they have waiters also. That is called catering. If you're making payment to that, that is also covered under 194C. And the last and the most important, which will obviously form a base of a lot of understanding, manufacturing or supplying of a product according to the requirements or specifications of customer by using material purchased from such customer or its associate. तो अब ये क्या है, इसमें आप समझते हैं, दिस इज वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, एंड इसको समझने के लिए वन थिंग इज एक्सट्रीमली इंपॉर्टेंट इज गाइस टू हैव एन एग्जांपल ऑफ माय फेवरेट सोफा. I don't know how to draw it. So, sofa. If I want to have a sofa for my office, there are three ways. One is that I go to a furniture shop, I purchase a sofa as it is, and then I make payment of it. First thing is clear that sofa which I purchase as it is a sale of good, and it's not a contract of work. Work मतलब कुछ job has to be done, some nature of activity has to be done on it. ठीक है? So that is a sale of an item, and that is not covered here. ठीक है? General sale of an item, it was ready, I picked up. Another example which would cover here is that I went to a sofa wala. I told him that I want it in this size, this shape, etc. He sent a furniture wala with me, and I got all the material to make that sofa. I provided him all the material, and he made it as per my specifications. My specifications and material was also mine. And material was also mine, and then he produced an article. That production, which is done as per my specifications, my material, is a work contract. Is a work contract where material is also mine, specifications are also mine. That is a work contract. Last case हो सकता है that I went to a furniture shop where I told them that I will come and take it tomorrow. Just change the color of this fabric. Okay. I don't want in red. I want it in blue. Then specification is there, but my material is not there. The material, as in material provided by me, means I did not went to the market, got the material or purchased it, etc. etc. Okay. So that case may it is not job work. So job or not work, I should say. So work is something, guys, which is done as per my specification and as per material provided by me, as in the person who is making the payment for it. Then only it will result into a payment in the nature of work. Then only it would result in a payment in the nature of work. यहाँ पे बात कब हो रही है? When I'm talking about any article which is produced or any thing which is made out, any manufacturing or production is happening उस sense में. Construction work में obviously I cannot provide. Construction work is very much a work contract, but I cannot go and provide everything to the construction वाला. Correct? I cannot go and provide everything to the construction वाला. वो नहीं होगा. So if you will keep the sofa wall example in mind, you will easily understand what point E wants to say and what is coverage of it. So work contract, guys, everyone here, if I want to simplify the meaning of work contract, I would say that work contract is, it can be any contract of work or labor. It can be maintenance contract or anything, but it will definitely include these five things. Including का मतलब लिखा हुआ है, exclusive नहीं है. और भी चीजें हो सकती हैं, बट ये तो पक्का होंगी. कौन सा? एडवर्टाइजिंग, ब्रॉडकास्टिंग, टेलीकास्टिंग, केटरिंग, कैरेज ऑफ गुड्स एंड पैसेंजर्स एक्सेप्ट रेलवेज, and manufacturing or supplying of a product as per the specification of customer by using material provided by the customer or his close relatives. This is the meaning of work. इसके अलावा there can be n number of things which can come under the meaning of work contract, जहां पे भी कोई भी मैनुअल रिलेटेड वर्क हो रहा है एक्सेप्ट प्रोफेशनल एंड टेक्निकल, एज आई टोल्ड यू, दैट इज वर्क कॉन्ट्रैक्ट प्योरली. कंस्ट्रक्शन इज अ वर्क कॉन्ट्रैक्ट. अब वहां पे आप बोलोगे कि मैम व्हाई द मटेरियल थिंग इज नॉट रिटन? बिकॉज हियर वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट मैन्युफैक्चरिंग और सप्लाइंग ऑफ अ प्रोडक्ट. कोई प्रोडक्ट मैन्युफैक्चर या सप्लाई हो रहा है एज पर स्पेसिफिकेशन. कंस्ट्रक्शन इन सेल्फ इज एन एक्टिविटी, इज अ ऑल टुगेदर सेट ऑफ मल्टीपल एक्टिविटी. Okay, now this brings me to a lot of questions which are resulting from here. First question and first important thing which you have to remember is that when we talk about individuals and HUF, mark it as very important. Even if वो कब eligible deductor होते हैं? When in the previous year they have, preceding year they have a turnover or profession receipts, and that is more than 1 crore or 50 lakhs respectively, correct? But I would say that they would not be covered or they would not be required to deduct TDS if they are making payment to for work contract for personal nature. For personal nature. Now you will say, what do you mean by this, ma'am, for personal nature? Simple side. Let's take an example of catering. Let's assume I'm a person who has a turnover of 5 crores in the preceding year. ध्यान से सुनना example. Let's say I'm a person who has a turnover of 5 crore in the preceding year. Now, if I pay for catering at my office event, I would be required to deduct the TDS. But if I pay for catering at in a house party or say my child's birthday or anything else, then I do not have to deduct the TDS, even if I am a person who is an eligible deductor, even if the term, the nature of payment is covered under 194C, but since it's for personal purpose, it is excluded. Similarly, this sofa example, if I go and prepare a sofa as per my specification, as per my product for my office, it would be 194C. But it's as per my specification, as per my material, but for my home that sofa is made, it would not be covered. Why? Because it is for personal purpose. Second thing which you have to remember is that when you are making payment for carriage of goods or passengers, so naturally you will be making payment to whom? You will be making payment to transport agency, which is called GTA, Goods Transport Agency. You will be making payment to a good transport agency or the goods carriage के लिए. So there, if that carriage, अब क्या होता है, generally truck drivers collect the payment and they do not understand the law etc. उनको जितना payment बोला जाता है for the carriage, they have to get it. So they made an exception. Generally, you have to deduct the TDS of 1% or 2%. I am a person, any person making payment to a goods carriage company or a GTA, and that particular goods carriage organization or GTA is or has less than or equal to or at max 10 trucks during the year. At max 10 trucks at any time during the year. And they give me their PAN details. Then even if it's a good carriage thing, even if it is a work contract, even if I'm an eligible deductor, I need not deduct TDS. No need to deduct TDS. No need to deduct TDS. This is specifically only for goods carriage company if they are the one who have less than 10 or less than 10 trucks during the year. Okay. Now another thing which you have to remember here is the broadcasting wala cheez. इसमें there are circulars also and I will make it simplified also. Suppose there was an era when all the channels had mythological serials, कोई राम पे serial बना रहा है, कोई शिव जी पे serial बना रहा है. So there were a lot of mythological serials. Now suppose if ZTV goes to a production house and say that we also want a mythological serial, and they give the specifications that this is how the serial should be, this is how we want it, this should be the place of location, this should be the storyline. As in, they have given Mota Mati the specifications and the production house develops that program. So naturally, it is coming under the broad telecasting category that the TV is giving production house payment for telecasting. That, my friend, is covered under 194C, where it is made as per the specifications. But where it is not made as per the specifications, it is not made as per the specifications. Suppose a production house had the program already ready. उनका program एक already ready था and they just gave it to ZTV. They just gave it to CTV. Then it is like selling of the rights. It is like selling of the copyrights. Okay. So that is not 194C. Work contract का crux क्या है guys? When you're working as per someone's specifications, that is work contract. That is work contract. और भी स्पेसिफिकेशंस है मैम, जीएसटी इंक्लूडेड है बिल तो उस पे टीडीएस काटेंगे? नो, उस पे टीडीएस नहीं काटेंगे. सो नो टीडीएस ऑन द जीएसटी. सो सपोज इट इज लाइक 1000 plus 18%, you will deduct the TDS on this 1000 if required. Next thing which you have to say, which I will give you more clarifications on, which you might not even find it here. 1 second. अब मेरे को एक एड एजेंसी को पेमेंट करा मैंने फॉर होर्डिंग्स. ओके, I want a hoarding on a railway station. I made a payment for to an ad agency, जिसका भी वहां पे राइट था. So that payment is under 194C because it is advertising, correct? अब वो एड कैसी होनी चाहिए और उसमें आई सेड कि आई वांट से शाहरुख खान इन इट. नो, आई विल नॉट मेक द पेमेंट टू शाहरुख खान. एड एजेंसी ने जो भी फुल पेमेंट दिया, दे विल मेक द पेमेंट टू शाहरुख खान और द मॉडल whosoever is coming there. So now ad agency making payment to models is not advertising. That is their professional service. उन्होंने model services दी, model agent services दी, film artist service दी. That is professional service. That would come in 194J, which we will see. Okay. Then sponsorship fees I told you is 194C. What else is 194C? Maintenance contract. AMC होता है, lifts का AMC होता है, ACs का AMC होता है, हर एक चीज का AMC होता है. Those are all 194C. Then your अब आप बोलोगे कि मैम रेस्टोरेंट में जाके खाना इज केटरिंग. नो, केटरिंग इज व्हेन यू डू the entire process from start to end as per my specification. Going to normal restaurants and cafes is not catering. Payment to transporters वाला चीज याद रखना. Payment to transport at max 10 vehicles and provides span and gives you a declaration that I have maximum 10 vehicles, then you don't have to deduct TDS. Then हाँ, goods passengers का एक और चीज. I hired a bus. Okay, I hired a bus. Now, if I hire a bus from an agency that is called carriage of passengers, and you will say 194C. Do not go blindly. If I'm hiring a bus, first of all, it should be for official purpose. I'm taking employees with me, and now the bus is not under my control. It is like the driver is there. Obviously, he will go as per my instructions, but the driver would take it. He would take care of all the petrols and other things, etc. He would take care of the toll, etc. I just have done a contract of carriage of passengers. Then it is 194C. But if I hire the bus altogether, and now I will select who would be the driver. Now I would select what would be the route taken, how many stops time we have to stop. I have to make sure that I will pay the petrol for it. I have to make sure everything, the toll for it. So basically, the right is under my control. Then it is hiring, and hiring is 194 I, जो भी हम rent के लिए पढ़ेंगे. I'll take up those examples again there also, but you have to make a variation while understanding. Okay, got it, guys? So that is the most important things regarding 194C. मैम अगर एक चीज में मटेरियल का भी कॉस्ट है और सर्विसेज का भी कॉस्ट है, टीडीएस कितने पे कटेगा? सर्विसेज पे. Until and unless it is not separable, TDS would be on only the service amount. Okay, so that is all 194C. I'll quickly repeat it for the revision purpose. Section 194C talks about TDS on payment made to contractors or subcontractors. Here, the payer is the contractee or the deductor is the contractee, except individual HF. And individual HF would be covered only if in the preceding year they have a turnover of more than 1 crore or gross receipts of more than 50 lakhs in case of business or profession respectively, then only they would be required. Individual HF, AOP, BOI, all of them. Time of deduction is credit or payment, whichever is earlier. Payee is any resident person or resident contractor. Rate is 1% when individual or HF are the payee, 2% when other payees are involved. Limit is 30,000 or 1 lakh. 30,000 single transaction ka, single ka, or 1 lakh in aggregate during the financial year. What does work include? Work included. Work generally means supply, labor work or work contracts. Work. It includes other things like advertising, broadcasting, telecasting, carriage of goods or passengers other than railways, catering, and manufacturing of article or supplying of a product as per the specification and as per the material provided. Others would not be included. Production of program, yeah, individual and HF making any payment for personal purpose, even if they have that business wala turnover, they would not be covered here. Uh, Production of a program as per the specification, the channel making payment to the production program, 194C, the channel making payment to a production program not as per the specification and just purchasing the right, not 194C. उसके अलावा जीएसटी कंपोनेंट में नो टीडीएस इज रिक्वायर्ड टू बी डिडक्टेड. उसके अलावा दिस इज जनरल, यू कैन कवर अप. अभी धीरे धीरे when you will see 194J and 194I and 194H, we will do some more examples which will give you more clarity on it. So this is 194C from my side, guys. एक बार go through it. थोड़ा स्पीड स्लो हो गया because of the net and other thing. कोई doubt है तो बताओ. Third option is also not supplier sofa, correct? It is supplier sofa, but not as per the material provided by me. It will not cover you. Any other doubts, Simranjeet, Monisha, Namrita, all of those who are listening live? बढ़े आगे. Perfect. 194C में कुछ कुछ टेक्निकल चीजें हैं, ध्यान रखना. ओके, नाउ वी स्टार्ट विथ 3 कॉमन सेक्शंस ऑफ कमीशन. Commission is obviously when someone works as an agent for me. That is what commission is, and I'm making payment to them. It can be for getting any services or sale accomplished. That is commission. Brokerage for stock markets is not covered here. तो कमीशन एक तो गाइस मेरा सेक्शन 194D कवर करता है, एक कवर करता है 194G, and one is the general commission which is covered under 194H. So I'm all doing all of them together. So 194D talks about insurance commission. अब ये इंश्योरेंस कमीशन कौन सा होता है गाइस? जो इफ यू सी, there are people who sell insurance on behalf of insurance company. They are called insurance agents. They are called insurance agents. So यहाँ पे it's not me who is making them the payment. Who would make the payment for the commission? Who would be the payer in this case, guys? The payer would be the insurance company. Correct. It would not be you and me because they are the agent of the company. Then the more the insurance they will sell, the more the commission they get. So यहाँ पे वो वाला बात हो रहा है, ठीक है? यहाँ पे we are talking about that particular commission, and that may we don't have any role to play. Who will get that commission? Obviously, the agent will get that commission. Who is the pay? The resident agent. यहाँ पे रेट क्या है गाइस? Rate is simple, at the rate of 5%. At the rate of 5%. Threshold? Threshold be simple, 15,000. When the commission paid during the year crosses 15,000, exceeds 15,000. Simple. और कुछ नहीं, time, whichever is earlier. Payment or credit, whichever is earlier. सिंपल, क्लियर हो गया. कौन देगा इंश्योरेंस कमीशन को? एजेंट्स. कमीशन के एजेंट्स को कौन देगा? इंश्योरेंस कंपनी. ठीक है. 194G क्या है? 194G इज लॉटरी एजेंट कमीशन. लॉटरी एजेंट कमीशन. यहाँ पे भी गाइस सेम थिंग, एवरीथिंग इज सेम, सिंपल, बट यहाँ पे ऑल्सो यू हैव टू आइडेंटिफाई करेक्टली हु इज द पेयर एंड हु इज द पे. द पेयर यहाँ पे कौन होगा? अब ये है क्या? फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, लॉटरी एजेंट कमीशन क्या होता है? Company which is organizing lottery obviously have to first sell tickets. So tickets, who sell those tickets? The agent sells those tickets. So the more the tickets are sold by the agents, the more commission he gets. So commission किससे मिल रहा है? Who is paying them the commission? The any person who is arranging that lottery, correct? Any person who is arranging that lottery, and he is making payment to any person. He is making payment to any person who is an agent who is selling those lottery tickets, who is selling those lottery tickets. यहाँ पे भी 5% पे कटेगा at when it exceeds, and the commission exceeds 15,000. Tickets नहीं, commission exceeds 50,000, and time is same, payment of credit whichever is earlier. This is again not very important. Coming to the most common one, a normal natural commission. Commission can be for anything. Commission can be for sales. Commission can be for getting clients. Commission can be for selling a property. Commission can be for anything. यहाँ पे now the focus has to be there. Commission can be brokerage also, but it can be for anything. I told you specifically, brokerage for sale of shares are not included in the meaning of commission. So now, यहाँ पे question आता है, who would be the eligible deductor Obviously, the person who is making payment in the nature of commission, 194H पे है focus guys, who is making payment in the nature of commission, so any person. But यहाँ पे भी same guys, same 194A वाला concept बोलते मैं, except individual or HUF. Individual or HUF, only when will they do the, when they will deduct the tax when their turnover in the preceding financial year exceeds 1 crore in case of business, or gross receipts go to more than 50 lakhs in case of profession. So individual and HUF generally nahi, only when they do it when they have the requisite turnover in the preceding year, and when they are making payment to any resident person for commission. Here also the rate is 5%. The limit is again more than 15,000. The limit is exceeding 15,000, exceeding more than दोनों नहीं. The limit is again if it exceeds 15,000. Again, payment or credit, whichever is earlier. So can I conclude कि जितने भी commission के तीनों sections हैं, be it 194B for insurance commission, 194G or 194H, all of them has a rate as 5% and limit as 15,000. But obviously the commission is different and hence the payer and payee are changing. The most common one which we all uses is 194H, where any person is making payment in the nature of commission to a resident person would deduct TDS under 194H, but any person may individual and HF would only be included if in the preceding year they have those requisite turnovers. ठीक है, अब यहाँ पे कुछ केस लॉज हैं स्पेसिफिकली विच वी हैव टू डिस्कस. वन 194H पे नाउ वी विल डिस्कस सर्टेन केस लॉस. सो एक बैक टू माय एजेंसी वाला पार्ट. एवरीवन, इससे पहले कोई डाउट? विच पॉइंट? Where are you seeing 10%, Mansha? Guys, अगर कोई भी डाउट रह जाता ना, प्लीज प्लीज डू आस्क इट अगेन एट टुवर्ड्स द एंड ऑफ द क्लास so that it is cleared then and there only. Lottery commission में any person, until unless I specifically write your resident person, it means any person. 194D. अच्छा हाँ, sorry. Okay, okay. I'll clear that also. So, शायद 194D में एक और रेट है 10% का, जब एजेंट डोमेस्टिक कंपनी होती है बस. When agents are domestic company, then it is 10%. प्लीज फोकस कर लें एक बार यहाँ पे, थैंक यू। नाउ एक सिंपल सा सीबीडीटी का क्लैरिफिकेशन है इस पे, विच सेज I have to go and get an ad in, say, Times of India. Okay, the Times of India. One way is I directly go to the Times of India office, but obviously it is non-approachable that easily. So what I do, like Mr. X, let's say, to get an ad in Times of India goes to an ad agency. There are agencies who work for us. Okay, they go to ad agency. Then ad agency goes and get the ad done, and then they make a payment to Times of India. Right? I am not making the payment to Times of India. He is making the payment to Times of India, the ad agency. Now, the question is pretty much clear here that when X is making payment to ad agency, that is under 194C, because the intent of making payment by X is what? Advertising, and advertising is covered under the meaning of work. So it would be 194C. See, all the examples are taken provided the person is eligible deductor. Now the question comes, when ad agency is making the payment to Times of India, will 194C would be attracted? The clarification is pretty much given here that it would not be 194C. It would not be 194C. So suppose X makes a payment of 1 lakh to the ad agency, or say 2 lakhs to the ad agency. Ad agency obviously will keep some profit share, and they paid, say, 1,50,000. Okay. So our question is, वो 50,000 which ad agency kept with himself, is that a commission? Second question ये आया, ठीक है, हमने मान लिया कि this is not 194C, we agreed on it, you said it, we agreed it. First, क्योंकि advertising यहाँ पे ad agency को नहीं कराना, intent of advertising is for X, so X paying to ad agency is 194C, and ad agency paying to Times of India is not 194C, we got that point. But the second question here is the spread of 50,000. Spread मतलब जो commission एक तरीके से, या जो the amount which ad agency kept of 50,000 with himself and paid 150 to the Times of India. Is this 50,000 in the nature of commission? Is this 50,000 is in the nature of commission? So the clarification came, no, it is not in the nature of commission. It's just the profit or the part which ad agency kept with him, or the amount which he charged for his service. That's it. It's not a commission की Times of India उनको commission दे रहे. Commission कब होता है? When someone is acting like my agent and like my pure agent. He's working for me and he's acting like my agent. यहाँ पे ad agency is not acting as an agent of Times of India. ऐसा नहीं है कि टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया ने कहा कि जाओ मेरे लिए काम ढूंढ के लाओ, जाओ मेरे लिए प्रिंट एड्स के क्लाइंट्स लेके आओ. नो, टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया डिड नॉट से देम टू गेट दैट थिंग डन. इट इज देयर एड एजेंसी का वर्क to get that thing done, and they approached Times of India, and obviously for the services which they're providing they kept a spread. So the question is clear that the nature of 50,000 is not commission, which should be seen from the point of view of Times of India and ad agency. It is not a commission. Okay, इनकम टैक्स एक्ट में किसी ने कान ऐसे पकड़ लिया टू से दैट दिस इज अ कमीशन. व्हाई? बिकॉज अ पर्सन इज कीपिंग इट हियर, और वो टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया वाले ने एक तरीके से एक्स्ट्रा 2 लाख की जगह 150 लिए और 50,000 कमीशन दे दिया. बट दैट इज नॉट द केस. 50,000 इज नॉट द कमीशन हियर. इट इज जस्ट अ स्प्रेड अ पर्सन हैज केप्ट. एजेंसी रिलेशनशिप होना इज एक्सट्रीमली इंपॉर्टेंट टू चार्ज एनीथिंग अंडर सेक्शन 194H as commission. And agency relationship nahi hua because Times of India was not the one who employed them to get that particular ads. Okay, it's just a profit with ads agency kept with himself. और एक तो जो एड एजेंसी मॉडल्स को देती है वो भी मैंने आपको क्लियर कर दिया, बट वी विल डू इट अगेन व्हेन वी विल बी पिकिंग अप. कौन सा लास्ट पॉइंट अमृता, कैन यू प्लीज से इट, और वन एक्चुअली व्हाट, वेट फॉर the topic to get over and then towards the end, please write it and tell. ठीक है? तो ये कुछ 194 डी, जी एंड एच के बारे में. आई होप इट इज सॉर्टेड. ओके, नाउ वी मूव ऑन टू 194 डी ए. बहुत सारे गाइस, बहुत सारे सेक्शंस हैं. So if you're thinking I'm rushing, no guys, I'm not rushing. अरे ठीक है, बड़े आगे फटाफट गाइस, वी स्टिल हैव अ लॉन्ग वे टू डू. सेक्शन 194 डी ए, पेमेंट इन रिस्पेक्ट ऑफ लाइफ इंश्योरेंस पॉलिसी. बिफोर आई गो एंड अंडरस्टैंड लाइफ इंश्योरेंस पॉलिसी का पेमेंट कैसे होता है, दिस इज नॉट विच आर गिविंग प्रीमियम, उससे नहीं है. जब लाइफ इंश्योरेंस पॉलिसी से वी गेट सम मनी, दैट पेमेंट जो मेच्योरिटी पे मिलता है. ओके, अब फोकस करो गाइस. ठीक है, सो लाइफ इंश्योरेंस पॉलिसी से जनरली वट एवर वी गेट ऑन मेच्योरिटी इज एग्जेम्प्ट. एग्जेम्प्ट है तो नो टीडीएस. व्हेन समथिंग इज एग्जेम्प्ट, देयर इज नो क्वेश्चन ऑफ टीडीएस. So it is exempt. But exempt under which section? Exempt under section 1010D. Whatever amount you receive from life insurance policy is exempt under section 1010D. But some amount is taxable. सारे amount exempt नहीं होते. Some amount are taxable as per section 1010D also. कौन सा amount? Amount which you receive under keyman insurance policy. This word I think you have studied a lot in other sources, in salaries, in also PGBP. Keyman insurance policy pay when any amount, maturity amount is received, that is taxable. Secondly, एक वो premium percentage, if you remember, if a percentage of premium exceeds 10% of the capital sum assured, 15% of the capital sum assured, or 12% of the capital sum assured, तो उसका प्रीमियम का डिडक्शन भी नहीं मिलता है गाइस. सिमिलरली यहाँ पे भी, if we get a maturity of an LIC whose premium exceeded those conditions, 10% if it is issued after 1st of April 2012, 15% in case of handicaps, and before that it was 20%, remember? So if the premium were exceeding the capital sum assured while you were making the payment, अब जब maturity पे the amount is received, that is taxable. And the last, when we talk about ULIPs, ULIPs पता है, unit linked insurance plan. Some plans which have a component of insurance also and investment also. So ULIPs pay, if you get maturity, if you get a money and the premium was more than 2,50,000, then it is taxable. ये again 194 DA से अभी कुछ लेना देना नहीं है. This is section 1010D which I'm telling you. So first, to see what is taxable, then only you will see the understanding when TDS is required to be deducted. So when an amount is not exempt under section 1010D on maturity, that means it is taxable, then only 194DA ka provision would be hit. Then only 194DA ka provision will hit, otherwise it will not hit. So once the provision of 194DA hits, then TDS has to be deducted. Who would deduct the TDS? Any person would deduct the TDS. Who would deduct the TDS, guys? Any person who is making the payment of that insurance amount. Then, to whom the payment is made? To resident person. To whom the payment is made? To resident person. What is the rate? Rate is 5% of income. इनकम क्यों बोला मैंने अभी बताती हूँ. टाइम ऑब्वियसली एट द टाइम ऑफ पेमेंट ओनली दे विल डू. इसमें क्रेडिट और पेमेंट वाला बात नहीं हुआ. नेक्स्ट एंड लास्ट थिंग हियर, ऑब्वियसली द थ्रेशोल्ड लिमिट. Threshold limit is when the maturity amount is 10 or above. Sorry, is 1 lakh or above. 1 lakh or above. So less than 1 lakh maturity amount है, no TDS. 1 lakh above है, then TDS would come. अब कुछ डिफरेंस है यहाँ पे एक वर्ड का, which is rate 5% of income. I have written the word 5% of income. Why do you think I've written this word specifically? तो इनकम क्या है इस केस में गाइस? इनकम क्या है? यहाँ पे लिखा है मैंने यहाँ पे इनकम इज नॉट मोर देन 1 लाख, हैव रिटन मैच्योरिटी अमाउंट इज 1 लाख और मोर. अब दोनों में फर्क क्या है गाइस? Maturity is the amount which you are getting, but what is the income? Income is simple, maturity minus the premiums paid during the year. Minus premium paid. मैंने every year 10,000 का premium दिया for 10 years. On maturity, I got 1,20,000. So what is the income? 20,000. So इस case में guys, if the amount is taxable, that is, it is not exempt under section 1010D, then only 194DA would be attracted, number one. And it would be attracted when the maturity is more than 1 lakh or more, which in my case was 120. It would be definitely attracted, but the TDS would be at the rate of 5% on income. And income in my case is 20,000. Income in my case is 20,000. How did 20,000 came? I gave 10,000 का premium for 10 years every year. तो 1 lakh गया, 1,20,000 आया मेच्योरिटी पे. तो what is the income? 20,000 is the income. 20,000 is the income. But to do 194DA, इस पे क्वेश्चन आता है guys, so do not think कि क्या पढ़ा रही हूँ. To do 194DA, you have to first see whether that amount is taxable or not. If it is taxable, then only it would be 194DA, and then you see the income amount and etc. But before that, you have to see whether it is taxable or not. So your 1010D provisions have to be clear. So अगर मैं फटाफट से क्वेश्चन करूं, which is in this case illustration 9. Everyone, screen, please. I'll do one, then you will do others, okay? X resident received 4.5 lakhs on maturity. Okay? Of a policy taken on 1st of April 21, of which sum assured is 4 lakhs and the annual premium is 1,25,000. That premium is 1,25,000, which is obviously 10%, more than 10% of the capital sum assured. That means this is a case which is not exempt under 1010D. That means 194DA would be attracted. अब attract तो होगा. सबसे पहले, is the maturity amount more than 1 lakh? Yes, it is more than 1 lakh. Second thing, X a resident is receiving. Yes, he is receiving. Now the question comes, the rate. Rate is 5%. 5% of what? Of the income. So to calculate income, I have to see what were the premiums paid. 125,000 कितने साल दिया? 3 साल दिया. 21, 22, 22, 23, and 23, 24. So amount which went was 375. Amount which came was 450. How much is the income? Income is 75,000. तो TDS कितने में करेगा? 75,000 पे 5% TDS would be deducted, which would be 3,750. Guys, TDS इनकम 1 लाख से ज्यादा हो रही है नहीं हो रही डज नॉट मैटर. मेच्योरिटी 1 लाख से ज्यादा होना चाहिए. देन इफ मेच्योरिटी इज मोर देन 1 लाख, देन इनकम निकालो एंड देन यू कैलकुलेट द TDS. समझ आया गाइस? वेरी गुड मनीष। सबको क्लियर? आगे बढ़े। लास्ट सेक्शन फॉर द डे, प्रॉमिस। माय फेवरेट सेक्शन, ईवी सेक्शन, इजी सेक्शन। Today to we almost gave 20 minutes to the introduction also. Tomorrow we have a class. Those who are thinking of logging out, tomorrow we have a class. Maximum of TDS would be covered. Entire TDS would be covered. And I'll try and I'll make sure that we start TCS also. Because in the last class, we will have a lot to do. Advanced tax समझना है, बहुत सारी चीजें 234 BC समझना है, okay? टाइम से ज्वाइन करना, बट अभी लास्ट सेक्शन फॉर द डे। TDS on the payment in the nature of rent. Correct? Okay. गीता, उसमें सेकंड केस में there is no TDS. Why? Because policy was taken before 31st March 2012 और उसका criteria is 20%. प्रीमियम अगर 20% से ज्यादा होगा तभी टैक्सेबल होगा, बट 20% इज नॉट गेटिंग टैक्स इन दैट केस, इसलिए। चलो। TDS in the nature of rent. Guys, rent. क्या होता है rent? When you are making payment for right to use any particular asset. It can be land, it can be building, it can be plant machinery, it can be motor vehicle, it can be anything. So rent, actually whenever we are making payments, that comes under section 194I. That comes under section 194I. So the payer here would be any person other than individual HUF, and individual and HUF would only be covered here if star if they in the preceding year have a turnover exceeding 1 crore or gross receipts exceeding 50 lakhs in the preceding financial year. Again and again I'm saying, concept याद रखोगे, compliance से overburden नहीं करना है, इसलिए exclude कर रहे हैं from common payments. Compliances डालने हैं तभी include कर. Okay? So 194I, TDS on the nature of rent. Payer, any person, payee again, resident person. Resident person. Rate, यहाँ पे rate is very interesting, guys. Rate, यहाँ पे there are two rates. If you are making payment for rent for plant and machinery or equipment, then it is 2%. If you're making payment for rent for any building, furniture इधर आएगा, okay? Then the rate is 10%. Then the rate is 10%. Plant and machinery, 2%. Building and furniture, 10%. Threshold limit. Threshold limit is when rent per payer is exceeding 2,40,000 per annum. इसने बहुत पहले पढ़ा हो, या maybe you have studied in inter, it was 180, but now it is 2,40,000 per annum. So guys, you have to remember a few things here that एक last credit time limit. Time limit is credit or due, whichever is earlier. Whichever is earlier. Now, you have to remember a few things. One is that I told you the limit is 2,40,000 per annum. बहुत कॉमन चीज होता है गाइस. एक होता है concept of co-ownership. Concept of what? Concept of co-ownership. The property, suppose, is owned by two people. A property, suppose, is owned by two people. Then who has to deduct the TDS and what amount? So suppose A is making payment for rent, and that rent place is owned by Mr. B and Mrs. B. Okay? Rent decided is 3 lakhs. Rent is 3 lakhs. 150 goes Mr. B के account में, 150 goes Mrs. B के account में. Now the question is, if suppose A is the person who's an individual having turnover exceeding 1 crore in the preceding year, the question is, on this rent payment, when when the rent is paid to Mr. B or Mrs. B, whether the TDS would be deducted because rent which Mr. A is paying is 3 lakhs. But 150 goes to Mr. B, 150 goes to Mrs. B. Will A deduct the TDS? The answer is no. The answer is no. Why? Because I told you the limit is 2,40,000 per payee. Per payee, as in per payer, per payee. That means if I'm making payment to Mr. B, उनके पैन में सिर्फ 150 reflect होगा as rent paid to him. Similarly, Mrs. B के पैन में only 150 reflect होगा as rent paid to her. So 150 का rent per party, 150 का rent per party. So it does not trigger the provisions of 194I. Okay. Now, on the contrary, A is making payment to B, okay, where he is making payment of 3 lakh in this case also, but 120 is for plant and machinery and 180 is for godown. 120 is for plant and machinery and 180 is for godown. Now the question which would come in your mind is how much TDS and whether TDS should be deducted or not, because plant and machinery ka rate is different, godown ka rate is different. Now will you say that 240 is a rent for plant and machinery ka limit and rent for godown ka limit? Whether this would require TDS? Yes. Why? Because the overall limit of rent is 2,40,000 per T. If it is more than 240, you have to deduct the TDS. It is immaterial whether the rent is going for plant and machinery or rent is going for ground, but per pan, matlab per P, matlab 2B, the rent is crossing 240, I will deduct the TDS. Yes, 120, TDS will be deducted at the rate of 2%, and on 180, TDS will be deducted at the rate of 10%. वो होगा, but definitely TDS is required to be deducted. Last thing which you have to remember here, not last actually, more than that. Guys, इसकी वजह से feedback मत करो अब करना. I don't know why today it's happening. All the things are happening today only. That for 194I, ownership is not the criteria. See, house property में होता होगा that you have to take the income only on the basis of ownership. But यहाँ पे suppose A is making payment to B who is the owner, and say, हाँ, उल्टा करते हैं. A is making payment to B and B is making ultimately payment to C. The flat is owned by C, which was let out to B and then B further let out to A. तो अगर रेंट है तो वो 194I है. Ownership does not matter. Even if B is not the owner in this case, C is the main owner, B is just a subletter. Till A is making payment for rent to B, 194I can be attracted if both are eligible deducted and deducted and threshold limits are crossed. Okay, so ownership is definitely not the criteria. Also, next thing which you have to remember is security deposits. Security deposits are refundable in general. If they are refundable, no TDS on security deposit because it's like a amount of security which you are given. It's not an amount of rent which you are paying. So if security deposit hai and you're paying it, for that you will not deduct the TDS. For that you will not deduct the TDS. Now, few more things and few more clarifications to answer your points. एक है, I have taken a good down, a warehouse. I have taken a warehouse on rent. I have taken a warehouse on rent. Will I deduct the TDS? Yes, I will deduct the TDS provided it's more than 240. Correct. Will I deduct the TDS? Yes. Warehouse है यहाँ पे मैं भी स्टोर करती हूँ तो I will definitely deduct the TDS. Correct. Now, there is a payment made for cold storage. A payment made for cold storage. अब cold storage का क्या concept होता है? Guys, they obviously give me the space also, but they are giving me a facility also, which is in the form of environment where my goods, specifically eatable items, are stored for a long time. अब suppose I am into fruit business. If I take a good down to keep my fruit, that is definitely a payment of rent, warehouse charge. But if I take cold storage facility where I will keep my fruits only, space तब भी मिल रहा है. But साथ साथ मुझे I am getting an environment where I can store my fruits. Correct. So that cold storage charges is not rent. That cold storage charges is 194C. It's a facility or service provided by a person to me. So that is definitely 194C, but not 194I. So just because you're getting a space does not make it 194I. You have to see wholesome nature में whether we are getting service or not. फिर एक होता है passenger service fee. PSF is a fees which is paid by airlines to airport. Airlines airport को passenger service fee देता है, which is basically a fees to handle their passengers because airports provide a lot of services, check-in counters, security check, then other services, and they handle the passengers basically. So PSF is in no way a 194I. It's not a 194I. It can be 194C, but it cannot be 194I. Airport cannot say that we let out your passengers in our building, so give us 194I on it. No, even if they're waiting in the airports, which is the building of the airport, but it cannot be rental charges. The passenger service fees which airlines pay to the airport cannot be a cannot be a 194I. इस पे theoretical question आ सकता है guys, अगर आएगा तो. Then one more thing which can come is long-term lease. क्या होता है जनरली व्हेन यू टेक फ्रॉम गवर्नमेंट यू टेक इट फ्रॉम लॉन्ग टर्म लीजेस. ठीक है, एंड फ्रंट पेमेंट करते हो ऑफ चार्जेस, लीज चार्जेस एंड प्रीमियम, एंड देन यू गेट इट फॉर लीज. It is lease, so you will say कि 194I है. No, it is not 194I. CBDT has clarified. since it is in the nature of getting the leasehold rights for long term, and making payment for leasehold rights in one shot would not attract 194I, would not attract 194I in this specific case. और कौन सा है? जीएसटी में 194I नहीं होता. Yeah, that's it. So for me, all the concepts of 194I are covered. I'll quickly repeat for all of you. 194I is TDS on rent. This is basically when you are making payment in the nature of rent. Payer is any person. Pay can be a payer is any person except individual HUF. Individual and HUF will deduct TDS in the preceding year. The turnover is more than 50 lakhs in case of profession. Gross receipt is more than 50 lakhs in case of profession. Turnover is more than 1 crore in case of business in the preceding year. Limit is 2%, 10%, 2% in case the rent is paid for plant machinery equipment, 10% in case of other payments like factory, building, furniture also. बहुत लोगों को लगता है furniture is in 2%. No, furniture is in 10%. Time is payment or credit, whichever is earlier. Threshold limit is 2,40,000. Say above when rent is there, then only TDS has to be deducted. It is per payer, per pay limit. If per pay it is not crossing 240, you will not deduct the TDS. Warehousing charges definitely is 194I, but cold storage charges is 194C. It is irrelevant that the person is owner or not, or wherever he's taxing his income, not on house property, wherever it does not matter. Passenger service fees paid by airline to airport operators does not attract provisions of 194I. Long-term leases paid to government will not attract 194I. Okay? And GST only on rental components. Next class, we'll start with 194J. 194J के बाद I'll do 194IA, IB, ICM. And then I will proceed to N, O, P, Q, R, which are new and tough sections. Then 194B, B, D, A. And then we'll go to other provisions. So next class, which is tomorrow, would be very interesting class because it would be more technical. This class you might feel was covering common deductions because we need to set that pace right. So today we discussed somewhere around 14 sections, if not much. So we started with understanding the provisions of TDS. We did 192, 192A, 193, 194, 194A, 194C, 194D, 194G, 194H, 194DA, and 194I. I hope you enjoyed today's class. Please wait if you want to address some of your questions. I'm here for 2 minutes. Please let me know if there are any questions which you want to address. Someone was asking question regarding 194C. Namrata, any question? Last point, which point? Please let me know. Please, इसको थोड़ा सा break के बाद पढ़ना, and tomorrow being Sunday, do not miss the class. It's a very important topic, okay? Thus, if your queries are solved, you can leave, and I'm waiting for some questions. If it comes, you can answer it. Okay. So I hope all your doubts are clear. फिर भी कोई रह जाए next class में, please make sure that you join timely so that I can clear all your doubts. Thank you and see you in the next class. Good night.